I know you're talking about your face. Yeah. Toro's also joined.
I was just coming to watch because I have to go on a program just now with the at the dinner to do a message.
Okay. I want just okay. Just I want to what the video is just going to be. I know you can watch afterwards and can send a copy of it. But the whole idea here is to look at it, not the whole video, but from what Bonald was the introduction and what he was saying, so we could discuss it as we go along. Ms. Tessa Barry is here. She should be back in here with us, in a short while. So Bonald went through a lot today, and you can look at it in your.
Yes, I don't know how I missed it.
That was really good. Today, that was Bonald's most explicit description and talk about the revolution and its programming and how and what was done and how it was done, the process of achieving what we had achieved in grade and how it was done.
Wow. How long was it?
2 hours.
Oh my goodness. Well, Lord, you have to send me that tape, boy.
Send it to you already. It's in your email. So you gotta check it out there, because trust me, Tessa asked some questions there, but he gave a detailed account of what happened. And we could synopsis of different things, but it's just part one of many other conversations between he and Val and Ms. Tessa Barry. So we have a lot more of that to come. So you wanted to study the video and continue studying did you get the document I sent you, the Revo Economics that I sent you?
No.
You got it?
No.
Okay. We send it to you again. We're supposed to discuss that tonight as well with Toro and other persons tonight. So that would have been a part of what we have been discussing here tonight as well. But I'll play the video so persons could hear Bonald and see him explain.
Very good. Very good. Excellent.
Yes, I was really impressed with his explanation and what we need. That's what we need right now. We didn't, how it unfolded and what would have happened. And even make a mention of something that I never thought about it. Gary was a progressive revolutionary country. And Gary cited that the Morris Bishop and them, it could be taken with other mantle of the revolution to carry forward to build greater. Imagine that in a Gary speech, Gary said that these were the men, the new revolutionaries that would take the next step. He was the first revolutionary. And the Morris
had said that before the revolution?
Yeah, before the revolution. But I said that today. Gary said that, and these are the men who take Gary to the next level. You want to listen to this. This is most, exclusive with Bonald since 1983. And the economy. But put everything together, how the economy was put together, the transportation, the farmers, the marketing board. He touched everything. Everything. Yeah, it was really cool. So something that you want.
I have to look at that. I have to look at that because there's a lot of interest now in the experience of the revolution and what was done, how it was done, and so people keep asking all the time. All right.
Watch the document. You need to read the document and listen to the tape. Listen to the tape. Read the document first. Listen to the tape after, because you'll get an understanding of what the document is about and what the Bonald is saying in the document.
Perfect. I will.
Really
Take care. So let me go on. I have to go and prepare for this thing because I have to speak at the dinner just now. It's supposed to be 8:30, but they're running a little late.
One in New York?
The one in Toronto, but New York is going to be at 9 o'clock when Deacon speaks. The New York one is happening already, but Deacon is going to come out at 9 o'clock and just give a brief message.
I told you I couldn't bring that one tonight because of the same thing.
Yes.
And then Jess go out to do something else with some other project that they have doing as well. So we couldn't do both tonight,
But if there's a link or video afterwards, I'll send it to you.
Yes, most definitely. Send it to me.
All right, thanks. Take care, dear. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Cool.
Grenada, country surrounded by water, found itself actually importing most of its fish and unable to feed its people properly otherwise.
What we produce here must belong to us. What's ours is ours. We don't want what America has, or Canada has, or any other country. We want what we have to be ours.
I'm responsible for coordinating food and nutrition programs throughout Grenada, Caribbean, and pretty much Negan. What we have done since we started is to initiate a system of nutrition assistance to each parish. Our nutrition assistants have been able to make direct contact and face-to-face contact with people in the community so that they're able to discuss what their nutritional problems are, particularly with their young children.
A campaign to eat local has been necessary because colonialism encouraged the people for generations to think that expensive imported food was better. Local foods were symbolic of poverty.
Only when we recognize the root causes of this kind of problem, root causes in our situation lies in the effects of imperialism and the way they want to keep us down, the way the countries who have the money, the countries who produce the grain, for example, which is what our people depend on. 70% of our energy intake comes from flour, and that is controlled by the United States. The export of it, the price of it, and all that, right? And people are encouraged to eat this rather than to eat what they produce. People are encouraged to continue at a low productivity level so that they continue to be the consumers of wheat.
The Caribbean is seen fundamentally, or Latin America is seen fundamentally, as a collection of banana republics. Our people are not respected. Our suffering is dismissed. In fact, some people see us as Neanderthals.
Such arrogance has always characterized the U.S. involvement in the Caribbean.
The more than 200 interventions made by the United States, military interventions, since the 1790s, more than 100 of those interventions have been in the Caribbean.
All of these actions have been taken under the guise of fighting the spread of communism and defending the region for U.S.-style democracy.
All right. Okay, Comrade Cole and Sister Chesterberry, Dr. Chesterberry.
Yes. I must say, that video clip, I have that in my archives because I've been trying to get as much information as I could and storing them. But that lady, I don't even know the lady with the bread,
yes,
the flour in the documentary.
Uh-huh.
Right. So I grew up right next to her in Budge Grove. That's me, family, mom's side. So actually eating that leavened bread, I going downstairs. But she's had bread for a penny. When I was small. Yes. Her grandchildren so, and I know of that. It leads to 5 years.
Wow.
A few years ago. Callis, is she alive? Who spoke about the food and nutrition?
She's alive. Might be in Grenada right now.
I don't know if it's possible to and if you would be able to get in contact with them.
Let me see. It's that
to Claudette.
Yeah.
Lives in Pathways,
Yeah.
That's where she lives. And whenever Candia tends to stay with Claudette, and so Claudette will, she'll either be with Claudette or Claudette will know where she is, right?
Okay.
You can reach her in that way. I think she has some medical challenges. So if she does, if I'm right in my information, because I've been out of touch for a while, then she'll tell you, no? And if she doesn't, then no problem, you know?
That's fine, yeah.
So Claudette would be the one who would know, like how to contact her, where she is, and things like that. Let me tell you something. Now, that lady, Candia Aline, father and the whole family originally from Dominica. Father was posted by the British colonialists, back in those days. They moved civil servants around the islands to be in charge in different islands. So he was at one stage, I think, either Attorney General or Solicitor General or something legal in Grenada for quite a few years. And so Candia and her older brother, Brian Aline, who, as you know, became a judge. Well, first of all, he was the Deputy Prime Minister under Eugenia Charles. And he became a judge, and was, I think, the acting Chief Justice for a few years. So Brian and Candia went to school in Grenada. Brian went to Presentation Brothers College, EBC, and Candia went to convent, St. Joseph's Convent, St. George's. And by the way, so did Eugenia Charles, an earlier generation. Right? A lot of people from the other islands, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, Trinidad, even Venezuela, came to Grenada for education. Men mostly came to GBSS, but a few like Brian went to EBC, and women went to St. Joseph's Convent mostly, right? So there's that interesting background. Now, when the invasion took place and the Americans took over the country at one point, they deported her. She's a Grenadian citizen. They deported her. Imagine, foreign troops with absolutely no right. In fact, they're breaking international law. The United Nations condemned it. They were war criminals, really. And they're deporting citizens up to another island where they happen to have been born. So you have that kind of irony. So Candia was actually deported from Grenada. Can you imagine that? Anyhow,
right.
That's a footnote. Now, with respect to the amount of matters that you've raised, you have a lot of ground to cover. Would you like me to make an initial presentation of material in the field of agriculture or what? How
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you could make an initial presentation and then afterwards. Yeah.
Right. Question.
Yeah.
Now, I had planned to start in a particular way, and I still will. But before that, because I'm afraid I might forget, let me just make. I'm getting young. We just add a couple of points that arise out of your presentation about yourself and your background and so on, and in terms of policy. Now, policy of the TRG, as you know, as you may or may not know, was my area of responsibility. Anything to do with economics, any aspect of the economy, and that was basically my job. And I wrote manifesto of the party back in years before. I wrote not the whole manifesto, but I wrote about half. Maurice wrote the other half, but half I wrote was on the economy, all different aspects of the economy. Now, we had a strict policy, and that is this. Any state enterprise that we set up, either that we set up from scratch, like agro-industries, like fish processing, making saltfish, like juices and nectars, like cocoa processing, coffee processing, anything that we start from scratch, or anything that we took over, like the sugar factory, because the people who owned it, they came to us and said, look, They are losing money massively. Would you join us? Would you put capital into it? We will agree on what the value of that is and we'd work it on that basis and so on. So that was a case where making of rum and sugar and all those products, which had been previously, it was now a collaborative venture between the former owners and the new ownership structure, right? In fact, I have a chapter in my volume 3 dealing specifically. Is it volume 3 or volume 2? Come to think of it. I'm not sure. No, volume 2. Volume 2. Volume 2. DMB Cromwell comes in to see me with a proposal. DMB Cromwell, nobody hate the revolution more than DMB Cromwell. And so on, and he says, you know, so you read that, and it gives you the whole background on how the PRG became involved with Sugar Factory project. So something we started from scratch, like the examples I gave you, or whether something that we were invited to come and participate in and basically take over, because we were given 80% of the shares. The original owners kept 20% of the shares because we moved in heavy equipment. We put a lot of resources in. Whatever it is, we had a policy, basically, and that is that no special favors of state enterprises, none. So, for example, the private sector have all kinds of tax holidays, and all sorts of incentives, that they get. None for the state sector. You're getting no tax breaks, you're getting no tariff concessions. So you're not going to get a nice high tariff so that imports can't come in, because when they come in and they slap the tariff on it, it then becomes more expensive than the locally produced item because of the tariff, right? No quotas. That's another technique. You know, you say, okay, they can bring in X amount, but beyond that, they can't bring in above a certain amount. So again, you give the local manufacturers a chance to, sell.
Yes.
We refused to do any of that for the state sector. We didn't take away any of the privileges that the private sector had in these regards, but it was something I felt very strongly about. As you know, my passion is economics. So you may or may not know, my passion is economics.
Yes, I know. I am aware.
My first professor of economics was my mother, who took me with her to one shop at age 3. And at age 7, she said, now you go and do the household shopping every week now. I did it on my own. So I had to buy the fruits, the vegetables, the meat, the fish, and then go back 2 hours later for the dry goods, in the supermarket and all that. So I did all the shopping. So then years later, I did the A-level economics. I said, I know this concept. I know that concept. I didn't know the words. I didn't know the terms, but I was practicing it. I knew what real real money was, or real wages was, as opposed to the money and so on. I knew what elasticity of demand was. I knew what price elasticity of demand was. I didn't know these concepts. I didn't know these fancy terms. I read in the textbook. I said, I know that.
Yeah.
So it was, the practical experience. And of course, I've always maintained that I know enough PhD economists teach at university. If you give them a corner shop to run, it's in a week. It's all learning. And that's why I maintain that mothers, especially from poor families, are the best practical applied economists in the world, but them know how to stretch a dollar. So I learned from my mother how to stretch a dollar. That's why we did so much with so little in the revolution.
Okay, good night again. Delbert Baptiste, Tessa Barry, good night, good night, good night.
Good night, good night.
Good night.
I want to bring that piece for obvious reasons, just to give a synopsis of where we're going tonight with that conversation. Delbert, Tessa Barry, Dr. Tessa Barry, Kamal Code had an exclusive interview that we will be playing here now. But after her interview here, Dr. Barry here, Bonal said to me, you got to meet this lady,
Well, tell him I'm ahead of him because I said that 3 weeks ago.
Our discussion, but almost everything goes to me to get to people who want to talk about that go here, and I said she said she would like to talk to him, so at the same time I put them on the same wavelength. She wanted to meet him, he wanted to meet her, but he wouldn't miss an opportunity. His busy schedule. He said, "You schedule a time and let's give it to me, and I'll make myself available for her." So today was the day that we had to make that set up for her and Bernard to meet.
I came in and I was laughing at some of the stuff that Bernard said, especially when he talked about DMB Cromwell.
Yes.
DMB Cromwell hated the revolution. I mean, but these men realized that very early that the economics was not about state control and state dominated, that there was going to be a fair and level playing field for them to survive. And they realized very quickly that because the economy had begun to expand and there were more opportunities, any business know that. If you're a major business in any country and all of a sudden the population begins to earn more money and have more disposable income, your business is going to benefit. So while they hated the idea of the revolution, they enjoyed its benefits.
I think one thing that was came up today is, remember, marketism.
Yes, that's it.
But we'll get into that, but Bernard said that it was not a capitalist idea. It's actually a socialist idea that they don't say it as a socialist idea, but that's what it really was. So Bernard will talk about that going forward here. But I want, Tessa, you could probably talk about a little about that. What Bernard talk about that? What you interpret by that?
But the concept of marketism.
Marketism, yeah.
Yeah, well, he spoke a lot in relative to price control and providing opportunities for markets, like marketing opportunities and creating a sort of competitive environment. So with the marketism, he was creating that enabling environment where both the public operations as well as private sector operations operated in that sort of market environment that was fair game for both. In other words, one did not have the advantage over the other. And it also included the concept of price control, in that you provided an opportunity whereby you prevented the whole idea of monopolism in some aspects in the market, and then also creating that opportunity of fair game on the market. So the idea of the marketism, I thought was an excellent one. It was in the context of ensuring that there was fairness in terms of the prices offered on the market. And he spoke to it also relative towards export, the idea of exporting and providing that opportunity for external markets as well as local markets, and ensuring that there was fairness on the local market.
Yeah. All right. So that's great. So that was go back there. So let's go back on the video here and we pick up from where he left off here.
And all that. That's a joke. My mother that trained me. Now, so I was hostile from the very beginning to the concept in economics known as infant industries, the infant industries argument, which of course you would know. Because my experience is that with one or two notable exceptions, infants never grow up. They remain infants for decades. So when you come to the stage where you want to get rid of the quota restriction or the extra tariff to protect the locally produced item, the people who own the factory make a fuss about it. The trade unionists make a fuss because they don't want to lose their members' employment. So that everybody makes a fuss, so that governments around the world, I've studied this around the world, they keep on extending another 5 years, and they never grow up. The infants never grow up. So I say, you know what? We're not having that. So therefore, agro-plant.
Sorry.
Company, forward, march.
Okay, we have mixed up here. Hold on a second. Oh my
Who
goodness.
will answer the call? Who will rescue? Who fall? Jesus calling.
Oh my goodness. I got interrupted.
Who will go? Who will go? Christ the Lord wants to know.
I pressed the wrong button. I know I can't find it.
Millions on the battle.
Okay, we got like a mix up here and go right back to our video. Let's hold a second there, folks. Oh, where is this thing? Okay, 13. Where? Why I lose? How come I lose that? Shit, goodness. Oh my. Wow. What happened? Wow. That is not really good. Let me see.
For good, to the benefit of our people.
Okay.
Lies in the
Okay. Oh my watch. And play a song. Play a song. Okay. And go back to that. Okay.
Check out every big onion. All of them have the solution. How to run this twin island and get the people out of this jam. You take a chance and give them the work and realizing they was making joke. After months you start knowing it's only old talk you was getting because Chip know, Jack know, Harry know how to run the show. Paul know, Mac know till the country falling down low. Low, the country falling down low. The country. You will see how the whole place tumbling down and there's so much pride people in town. Low, the country falling down. Low, the country breaking down. You will see how that phone just tumbling down and so much pride people in town. Get collapsed and they went away. The Papa song and the free they say. So if they reach they make we know. They call it the show. We tell me that they have plans. In them we put we confident. After once we get to realize.
Shipping things, England, other islands, and so on. I think even the idea was to that is the pool of resources from which the country can develop before.
Look, wait, before you continue.
Competitive on the local market, you expect to go and buy from you. Well, nobody sees revolution more than MB Cromwell. But he comes in a proposal. He's a character, he's quite a character. He's a very funny guy, and so on. And he says, so you read that. It's a short chapter, and it gives you the whole background on how the PRG became involved with the sugar factory project. So whether it's something we started from scratch, like the examples I gave you, or whether it's something that we were invited to come and participate in and basically take over because we were given 80% of the shares. The original owners kept 20% of the shares because we used in heavy equipment. We put a lot of resources in. Whatever it is, we had a policy. And that is that no favors for state enterprises, none. So for example, the private sector have all kinds of tax holidays and all sorts of incentives, that they get. None for the state sector. You're getting no tax breaks. You're getting no tariff concessions. So you're not going to get a nice high tariff so that imports can't come in, because when they come in and they slap the tariff on it, it then becomes more expensive than the locally produced item because of the tariff, right? No quotas. That's another technique. You say, okay, they can bring in X amount, but beyond that, they can't bring in above a certain amount. So again, you give the local manufacturers a chance to, sell.
Yes.
We refuse to do any of that for the state sector. We didn't take away any of the privileges that the private sector had in these regards, but it was something I felt very strongly about. As you know, my passion is economics. So you may or may not know my passion is economics.
Yes, I know. I am aware.
My first professor of economics was my mother, who took me with her to one shop at age 3. And at age 7, she said, now you go and do the household shopping every week now. I did it on my own. So I had to buy the fruits, the vegetables, the meat, the fish, and then go back 2 hours later for the dry goods, in the supermarket and all that. So I did all the shopping. So then years later, I did A-level economics. I said, I know this concept. I know that concept. I didn't know the words. I didn't know the terms, but I was practicing it. I knew what real money was, or real wages was, as opposed to the money weight and so on. I knew what income elasticity of demand was. I knew what price elasticity of demand was. I didn't know these concepts. I didn't know these fancy terms. I read in the textbook. I said, I know that.
Yeah.
So it was the practical experience. And of course, I've always maintained that I know enough PhD economists teach at university. If you give them a corner shop to run, it was in a week.
They
can
must
run a corner shop. They have PhD in economics. Genuinely have PhD in economics. It's all book learning. And that's why I maintain that mothers, especially from poor families, are the best practical applied economists in the world, but them know how to stretch a dollar. So I learned from my mother how to stretch a dollar. This is why we did so much with so little in the revolution. I give my mother all the credit. That's where I got my training. I have the degrees and all that. That's joke. My mother that trained me. Now, so I was hostile from the very beginning to the concept in economics known as infant industries, the infant industries argument, which of course you would know. Because my experience is that with 1 or 2 notable exceptions, infants never grow up. They remain infants for decades. So when you come to the stage where you want to get rid of the quota restriction or the extra tariff to protect the locally produced item, the people who own the factory make a fuss about it. The trade unionists make a fuss because they don't want to lose their members' employment.
Yeah.
So that everybody makes a fuss, so that governments around the world, I've studied this around the world, keep on extending another 5 years, and they never grow up. The infants never grow up. So I say, you know what? We're not having that. So therefore, our agro plant, making all those nectars and juices and whatnot, and all the other industries we started, they had to sell on the local market in competition with imported items, with no breaks, no quantity restrictions on imports, and no special tariffs. Whatever tariffs were there already, that were there from long before us, we left them. We didn't interfere with them, but we put nothing extra on. And our argument was this: if you want to become export, because we realized, listen, the size of our market really is too tiny. We can never develop our country on the basis of the home market. It's too small, the domestic market. Objectively, we have to be, like, our share size, export-led. We have to be an export-led economy in terms of growth and development beyond a certain amount. Okay, we could do certain amount by CARICOM if we can get CSME going in a serious way. That's another story. But even with that, before Haiti, I was 6-7 million people. That's a drop in the bucket. Even there, so you have to go beyond that. So we realized that if you're going to be export-oriented, you can't be putting up barriers for your local market, making yourself uncompetitive on the local market. You expect to go and buy from you. If you can't compete with the imported item, how are you going to compete in the Trinidad market, Jamaica market, Barbados market, the Canadian market, the New York market, market in London? How you? So therefore, one reason we were able to sell stuff to supermarkets and so on, there was a Canadian company, Canadian chain of supermarkets. They say, hey, you want to buy the thing? It's great. Love it. But we want massive quantities. This kind of quantities you're giving us, we have to have enough to put in all our branches. We can't be just stuck in one branch of our supermarket chain. Our problem was we weren't producing enough. We couldn't.
Quantity,
Right. In fact, we were actually now exploring, pulling other islands, to organize with farmers and where necessary with governments so that they could be planting stuff, right, that would then feed into our plant on the line so that we would have the quantities now to be able, when we ship into the Canadians now, we can give them the quantity. So in the meantime, we are getting some sales in Dominica and Trinidad and so on. We're getting a bit of sales, and so on. But any kind of serious breakout required us to scale up. And Canada could scale up only so much. So ironically, that would have bbe one way in which CARICOM integration could have been this. So anyhow, so the point is, therefore, we did have some exports and we did have some sales. In the case of coffee processing, for example, because cocoa processing, we did all the research, all the development, but we hadn't started to actually put it on the market yet. We had the cocoa processing, we didn't actually have the product on the market to just go and buy it on supermarket shelf. We had our coffee available for sale. I love the flavor of it. I love the flavor of the coffee. But it's interesting, within less than a year, if I'm wrong, it's something like 6 or 9 months, 50% of the local market, that's what I was told by the people involved, 50% of the local market get captured without restricting any imports. People like the flavor. So it was based on a blend of a certain amount of imported coffee beans with our local coffee beans that we pick locally, And so we had a distinctive blend. It tasted great, it smelled great, tasted great. The fact is, captured half of the local market without any import controls, without any extra tariffs, discriminatory tariffs, none of that stuff, right? So basically the instruction to everybody was, if you can't capture a sizable percentage of the local market without any favors being paid to you, then don't start, don't bother, right? That was the first principle. Second principle, and I explained to you the reason for it, that was the infant industries argument, which we rejected, but also because our strategy was export orientation for all our agriculture and agricultural processing stuff. The other thing is that we also said, we're given a period, a base period, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on the industry, in which you must be making a profit. At worst, you must be breaking even. Ideally, and in a not too distant future, you have to be putting money in the treasury. We are not setting up state industries like in so many parts of the world. Set up a state industry either from scratch or you're out of the private sector in that industry and you set it up, you become a government enterprise and you put your cousin to run it, you put your nephew to run it, you put your daughter or your son to run it, you put some party hack because he's a strong supporter of the party, so you put him to run it. We don't have time for that. People that I hired to run both the NCB and the GBC, which are banks, as you know, we set up.
Yeah.
The Americans invade. They left them as the managers. The public bank bought out NCB. They left who we left there. I put there as manager until the person retired. Both the manager and the deputy manager, which I appointed, they left them until they retired. GBC, the man we put there, Martin, he remained under US occupation. He remained and was bought out by RBTP and all of that. So because, by the way, the man we put to run NCB, I don't think he ever supported the revolution. I didn't care. I wanted the best manager. I spoke to the workers. You see, the workers had approached us to organize them in the union before the revolution. And so they had a link with them. So you say, who's the best person to run this? And who's the second best? We put them as manager and deputy manager. When we took over the other bank, we say, we're not putting two banks together because that'll be 51% of all deposits. That is going to encourage, that's monopoly. That's going to encourage laziness, slackness, lack of competition. We want competition. We want something large enough that it has economies of scale benefits, but not so large that you end up with the problem of monopoly. You want economies of scale, you don't want monopoly.
You don't want monopoly.
Competition. So that's why we set up two banks, not one state bank, two banks. And we put separate boards of management, separate boards of directors, separate managers, and all that. Ideas they must compete with each other. And the foreign banks, Barclays at the time, and Scotia. Now, the other thing is that we said to them, this is the policy. You must increase substantially the portfolio, loan portfolio for agriculture, for agro-industries, for tourism, for manufacturing. And by doing that, automatically you're reducing the percentage of the loan portfolio for buying imported motor car and imported consumer durables that are produced in the countries from which the banks originally came, Canada, America, Britain. In other words, we cannot develop if our banks are taking our deposits, our money, our people's money, farmers' money, workers' money, civil servants' money, and using it to buy imported items, imported durable consumer goods. Right? No. More and more of the loans must go to agriculture. So within 2 years, again, the figures you can get from Report on the Economy, I think that document has that. Within 2 years, NCB was loan portfolio had 69% of all loans to agriculture. 69%.
All right. Dr. Barry, I want to stop here, there, but again, I want just to pause here so we could evaluate that couple of points that Bona have raised there. One of the I can make my mic. See what we need some new phones to buy some new mics, right? Yeah. He made reference to no partisan person will be heading any government department. You want the best person for the job. Wasn't that tied? You are supporting the revolution. If you're not good, you would not get the job. So putting the right people in place to do the right thing. That's one. The other question is the question of the amount of money. 69% of that was going to agriculture. Right? Those state enterprises wasn't set up to be subsidized, but they must make a profit too. They give a time frame to be able to make a company at worst to have broken even. I want to hear your thoughts on that, Dr. Berry, on the breaking even, the money contributed towards the agriculture. Put your mic for a while. Put your mic. Yeah.
Right. So the point on the contribution of funds towards agriculture, and that's a very important point. And a discussion we spoke about. If you look at the budgets, the yearly budgets, and you look at the allocation of funds, and you look at the amount that is usually allocated in the agricultural sector, and that is not specifically only for Grenada. You can see that across the region in most of the other islands, that agriculture usually is at the bottom of the scale in terms of budgetary allocation when it comes to funding and investment. And this is instructive in that if we want to be self-sufficient, if we want to improve the sector, we have to invest in it. And he mentioned that, during the revolutionary period, there was that concerted effort to invest in the sector, to pump funds into the sector, because you want something to come out of it. So you put, in other words, it's what you put in is what you get out, what you get. So that for me was very instructive, and it's something that our government should pay attention to. If we want something out of this sector, we need to invest in the sector, and we need to increase on the budgetary allocations that usually goes towards agriculture. The second thing, the second point you mentioned, they put in persons who are let's say, who are experts in a field to work in certain positions. We have this old adage that says you do not put square pegs in round hole. And a lot of the times it's because we are politically aligned and because of our political affiliation, we get a job in certain sectors, or we are placed in certain roles, and not necessarily because we are qualified for these roles, and not that we aren't qualified in other sectors, but because we align ourselves, then we are placed in certain positions. And that is happening, like it or not, that is happening in a lot of countries. In other words, because we associate with a particular political party, then we are strategically placed, and not necessarily because we are the most suitable for that job. And that happens. And in other instances, sometimes we have the most qualified persons for a job, but because they are not, because they don't fit within the status quo, they are not given the positions. And one of the things he mentioned was that they looked for the most suitable persons, whether or not they were aligned to the revolution or not. They were given the opportunity to perform in that particular role. We have persons who would have studied, who would have gone and done certain areas that can be utilized. We have a lot of people who are Grenadians and who are who have studied in certain sectors that are not given the opportunity to perform or to contribute or give back in the areas that they're qualified for, probably merely because they are not politically aligned, or they're not associated with a particular party. And that happens, that has been happening a lot in different Caribbean countries. This is something we have to get out of. If we want the best in terms of performance, it's something we have to, we have to stay clear of and give persons who we believe who are suitable in performing a role. If you then see that they're not performing the role, then you assess them, you appraise them, and then you change it. But if you assess and you appraise and you realize that they are performing creditably or beyond average in that role, then you leave them there to perform in those roles, despite their alignment and the political affiliation.
Yeah. All right, Delbert, you're
Yes. Listen, I am sort of some of the numbers that Bernard is recounting there. I didn't even realize, as a matter of fact, with the NCB numbers, that within 2 or 3 years of an NCB operation, that's close to 70% of its loans were in agriculture. I didn't realize that the number was that high. I remember there was a strong emphasis on agriculture, but I didn't realize that the number was that high. So here you had a sector of the economy that was growing because, one, the government had decided to invest heavily in it from the capital expenditure budget. And then, because of the government policies and putting people on the board who understood what the national direction was, you had additional funds going into that industry. And clearly that you can when you marry those two things, with both, you have state funds coming in on one side and people in the private sector feeling comfortably enough to borrow against other assets they may have or future earnings to invest in agriculture. That you can clearly see why those two things resulted in the growth in agriculture that we had. I was lucky to be part of the Grenada delegation that went to East Germany for the Berlin Fair, where timber, nectar, and other stuff. I was not. It was a wider delegation that went there for on the visit, but there was a contingent that focused on on the fair and presenting our products. I remember I might be wrong, but I think two of our products won gold medal at that fair. I think it was the guava nectar and the tamarind nectar. I think those two won gold medals at that fair. I was more concentrating on the youth sport and culture part of that trip. But so much of what was said there was a new concept, obviously, to many of us at the time. But having become a little bit more scholarly about these things and certainly studying them and reading as much as possible in them, you realize um, how ahead of its time, certainly when it came to economic planning and understanding the marketplace, the revolution was. And here you are, we were, a socialist revolution. So the argument that we weren't focused on markets and allowing the market to determine what happens to industry has been proven wrong by the Grenada experiment, because as Bernard said, the question of infant industry, this is so well known in major Western capitals, right? Where the French are good at it, the Americans are good at it too. They act like they don't do it, but they protect their industries at all costs. And all an American president has to say to keep competition out is say it's a national security threat to the United States to allow this company or this person to invest in that business. And once the president pulls that card, there's nothing anybody else can do. And as Bernard so correctly said, those infant industry never grow up. They continue to receive protection from the state, and there is no incentive on the management to drive these companies or drive these initiatives into profitability, because whatever happens, they have a guaranteed market, because most of them are given quotas. They say, okay, you have 20% of the market, so they're doing just enough to maintain that 20% of the market and not growing the business. And in most cases, if they fail, the state will come in and prop them up with soft loans or grants or so forth. So I thought that concept was rather revolutionary in that period, because it spoke directly against what was at that period popularly being done in a number of other socialist countries. And that ties back to Bernard's own experience, as he said, learning, basic and fundamental economics from his mother. So while with all his vocations at this very high level, the fundamentals of, because in the end, economics, Morris used to say, well, it means one thing: if you don't put in, you can't take out, right? Mm-hmm. So it really, that's what in the end what it comes down to, and he's so correct. Your moms and probably single moms and moms in poor developing countries are the absolute best at stretching that dollar, and sometimes you really don't understand how they do it, and yeah.
We'll move on to another part of the discussion here, Bernard, today with Miss Dr. Tessa Barry. Well, and Bernard pronounced it today that she got to be called Dr. Tessa Barry.
I agree.
No, you're not compromising that one. She is Dr. Tessa Barry, and he was really elated with her performance and her study and the work she's doing. He encouraged her to continue the struggle of doing what she's doing and continue to aspire for greater things. So here continue the discussion. I hope I get it back on the right spot.
Let me say this, that you can talk to Paulette, not Paulette, I put as manager. the person retired, both the manager and the deputy manager, which had the National Bank. It's something called the National Bank. It had no money in it, or maybe it did once, but the time of the revolution, it had no money in it. Governments don't have a good reputation, this type of thing. It was trust. It was trust.
Are you hearing me?
Just right. And in no time, within 3 months, and thereafter we just grew and grew and grew in size. Then George's branch 1 year later. When it
okay, let me back up that a little bit.
As I say, I wrote the economics part of it.
Yeah.
He had decided then that we would nationalize all the banks. We would nationalize all.
I saw that in the document you sent to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All the merchant houses, all the import houses. But yes, there's a chapter in volume 2. Of memoirs that deals with that. As I unfolded, we realized you don't need to do that. We don't have enough managers to do that. You have to balance of not having foreign enterprises that are just extracting. They just use as that, like you set up a pump just to suck out all the blood, suck out everything. So set up a thing, they get all our local people money, and they use that local money now to buy imported items. So you have the economy in a state of permanent disequilibrium in terms of balance of payments. You have the country in a situation where there are no resources being reinvested to expand the economy, things like that. There's nothing being spent to develop a production sector that can export things, export modern agriculture and agro-industries and things like that. So the whole structure is exploitative, right? Foreign exploitative as the nature, the character of it. So that was the reason for saying you have to take it over.
Yeah.
The national system to serve the national interest. So I wrote an article, all 19 or 20 years of me, right? I was either 19 or just turned 20 at the time. I wrote back to the Torchlight newspaper from Brandeis University, where I was doing my first degree. And of course, I spent the whole time studying as much economics that was relevant to Grenada as possible, because I had a certain goal in mind, much like you, right?
Yeah.
You have the legacy. You are the legacy of the revolution. You know it.
Yes, you didn't have that.
Right. So what I did was I wrote this article, and D.M.B. Cromwell, who was the main shareholder of the Torchlight newspaper, and he owned a lot of businesses, Maria Scott, he owned the sugar factory, he owned a lot of stuff. He wrote back in the newspaper right away, newspaper which, as I say, he owned about 80% of the shares. He wrote back saying, what nonsense is this? How can you nationalize the bank? Where would Grenada ever get enough money to buy all the banks in Grenada, to buy Barclays Grenada, to buy Scotia Grenada, to buy CIBC Grenada, to buy Royal Bank Grenada? I said, no, you misunderstand. When you take over a bank, when a government takes over a bank, or even a private company, even a private individual buys out a bank, they don't buy out all the deposits in the bank. Deposits in the bank belong to Canadians.
Yeah.
They belong to individuals. All you're buying is the building and the vault, the equipment, all your and the what they call and what do you call in business, the goodwill, buy the goodwill. In other words, the bank has a certain brand, certain reputation. You might get certain money for that. Outside of that is just the building and the equipment and so on. If you buy that, that's all you're buying. You're not buying the deposit. The deposits remain, who own them now, they remain who own them now, namely the individual Grenadians who put the money in. He genuinely believed that if a bank had $100 million in it, we have to find 100 million plus by the bank.
To buy.
Right, so I straightened him out on that. Right? But nevertheless, when we came to actually run things now, we still did not take over all the banks. We only took over 2 of them.
I thought it was 3. But
no, it's 2. Remember, the cooperative bank was always Grenadian.
Okay, right. So it was 2 and then
during the revolution.
Right.
No, now it was for a while this bank in Grenada, not so long ago, under Richard Duncan. And with assets of almost 400 million.
Yeah, yeah.
And during the revolution, it had 5 million. The whole all deposits was 5 million. The bank used to have to put its money in Barclays vault, just across the road on Church Street. So the irony is that it was a kind of a bank, but really, in practice, it was almost like a private depositor because money was put over in Barclays Bank at the end of each day. It didn't have much money. It was very small back in the revolution days. So it was really 4 banks, certainly 4 foreign banks: Scotia, CIBC, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, Royal Bank of Commerce, Scotia, and Barclays. Right?
Yes.
That would have been before Barclays and CIBC joined together many years later. So, so we bought 2 of the 4.
So wait, before you continue, so where did NCB come in?
What happened was this. The Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, CIBC,
right.
Management, they send down managers, top people from Canada, from head office in Canada, to my office to say, we would like to sell the Grenville branch of the bank to you, not the whole of the bank, just the Grenville branch. So, so they said they want to sell it. I think I forgot how much, 3 million, some ridiculous thing. Right? I said they must believe that it's like, well, they must believe behind the deposits. So I said to them, no, $1. That's all I pay for banks, $1. So they said that's madness, and so. The sale fell through. I have a chapter in volume 2 on that.
On that, yeah.
It gives you the entire background, including the reason, the economic reasoning behind my saying $1, right? Because all of my advisors, all of my staff in the Ministry of Finance, they said, you're crazy. I mean, when the other side was out of the room, they said, you're crazy. Because for saying 3 million, that's what I know we're talking about St. George's Bank. And they went down to 950,000, then they went down to 450,000. Take it, 450,000. The vault alone is worth more than that. The building is worth more than that because the building in town belonged to the CIBC. The one in Grenville was just renting from somebody. So I said, no, $1. And in my chapter, I explained the reasoning, why I was able to persuade them. So that's why I bought 4 banks for $1. Yeah. CIBC Grenville, CIBC St. George's, that's $2 in all. CIBC Royal Bank Canada in Grenville, Royal Bank Canada in St. George's, that's 4. And 5. And Barclays Gov, Barclays had a Gov bank at the time, about that for $1 too. So I bought 5 banks for $5. EC dollars, right? I bought a telephone company for $1 as well, right?
And that was Grentel at the time.
Right. Yes, Grentel, correct. No, it wasn't Grentel. No, Grentel is a telephone. Yes, no, telephone company. That's right. It was actually Grentel, but it was 50% of it was owned by Continental Telephone of the United States,
right.
And 50% was Grenada government. So what we were buying was 50% of the company for $1. So anyhow, back to Grenville now. So the deal fell through. But they said, no, they can't sell the bank for $1. No, I mean, they have to pay them at least, I forget how many hundred, so we broke them down a few 100,000. I said, no, $1. So they left. They said, well, we're going to just leave, give notice to our depositors, and they can then deposit their money in other banks. I said, well, okay, go ahead. So that's what was done. And they did that. So then now, I spoke to Leiden, who was my Deputy Minister of Finance, Leiden Ramdani, and he says, well, I know the lady who owns the building that CIBC used for the bank in Grenville. So he arranged with the lady for us to continue renting the building. Right? So we didn't even have to buy a building or even, just rent the building from the person who always owned it. Right? And Leiden arranged for a company in Barbados to print all of, the deposit slips and withdrawal slips and all the materials that a bank needs for functioning. Leiden organized to get all that published and printed in Barbados and flew it in, had it flown in on a light plane. Because listen, we took the decision one day, we took it on the 1st of October, and on the 15th of October, 1979, we opened the branch of NCB. We opened NCB in Grenville. The big opening ceremony on a Sunday evening, and on Sunday evening, in the car park right opposite the bank.
Yeah, I know.
Because 14 days from the moment the decision was taken to open the bank, to the actual doors opening of the bank. No, we opened the bank door without one deposit. Of course, we put government capital into it. You must have a certain capital.
Right.
But in terms of deposits, we opened, obviously, without a single deposit. Within 3 months, we had the same $5 million that people had put in that bank of CIBC before CIBC left. Within 3 months. No, that's what you call putting your money where your mouth is. You know, because by government, why you don't government touch your money, boy, you don't want bank owned by government. Remember, because remember Gary had the National Bank. He said he called it National Bank. It had no money in it, or maybe he did once, but by the time of the revolution, it had no money in it. Governments don't have a good reputation for this type of thing. But there was trust. There was trust, which is why. And in no time, within 3 months, and thereafter we just grew and grew and grew in size. St. George's branch now, 1 year later, when they came back and said, we now want to sell the St. George's branch. By the way, CIBC was selling, they were leaving about 14 countries. There was one.
They were leaving the Caribbean.
The market was too small.
Yes.
Right, in the Caribbean, and I think
which is more or less what is happening. What is happening now with Scotiabank and so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What happened? Basically, we just stayed with the man. This is penny and seam. We're not making enough money with this kind of thing. So therefore, it's too much trouble. There's so little money. So they want to get out. And they've done that at that time in about 14 different markets. And as you say, some of that is going on now with a number of markets.
Yeah.
Right. But so we took it over in no time. We were making profits. Of course, we had a profit sharing thing we arranged with the workers. So for the first time in Grenada's history, bank workers were getting profits. There was, apart from the regular salary, they got a share of the profits at the end of each year. Now, of course, that tends to make people more concerned about the interests of the company they work for, because they're sharing the profits. It's a powerful incentive. So the point is that the NCB now was able to shift into giving within 2 years 69% of its loan portfolio in that agriculture. It's important. Now, here's the point. What we said was, that was one goal. One goal was productive sector. We want more and more, a majority of the loan portfolio of all the banks in that agriculture and other productive enterprises. And secondly, we want a reduction in the interest spread so that depositors would get somewhat higher interest on their deposits. But strictly speaking, you're borrowing the money from the people and then lending it to other people. And the difference between the two, after you pay interest to the depositors, is the gross profit from which you pay workers. You pay your bank staff, you pay your overheads, etc. And then whatever is left after that is net profit. And so, by the way,
so at this point again, I wanted to have a little discussion on that part of the purchasing power of buying the banks and the idea behind the people who did not really believe that it could have been done for $1. Delbert, to go to you first. Unmute your mic.
I obviously everybody knew Bernard drove a hard bargain, but I would disagree with him a little bit on the purchase price. Not that it didn't cost $1, because I remember when it was announced and gazetted and everything. But generally, when you do that, you have to have an infusion of cash from the new operators. So, from that sense, it probably ended up costing a little, but we said the bank became productive. The bank became productive very, very, very quickly. And the reality is that, right? The Grenada experiment, especially in areas surrounding the economy, was a departure from the regular other socialist economies around the world and that we were accustomed to. The Grenada one was unique. And I think that given the fact that at that time, CIBC they wanted out of the Caribbean anyway, so they were going to leave. So basically, they were trying to get the best value for whatever they had owned, and like he correctly stated, you're not selling the deposit. The deposits belong to the local people. But just the fact that they were able to accomplish those things in such a short period of time, okay? And I think so much of it, he's been modest there. But the reason that these financial institutions and the DMB Cromwells and them, and I forgot, yeah, DMB Cromwell did own Torchlight and Mario Scott and the Sugar Factory, and he was one of the early so-called Grenadian industrialists, I guess. Just the fact, the reason that we were able to accomplish so much is that even his detractors knew that he understood the economy better than anybody else in the country at the point in time. And that for the first time, Grenada actually had a finance minister who could speak to you could speak to locals and at the same time go and represent Grenada at these big conferences, whether it was the IMF, whether it was the IDB, whether it was the World Bank or anything, and you would feel that you get adequate representation. And the reason in the end that people like DMB Cromwell went to him with the proposal is that they saw the revolution was making progress and it was beginning to deliver significant tangible economic benefits to the people. And they wanted to be part of that train. So it's just very interesting that he recalls it the way he does.
Yeah. Dr. Berry?
This was actually a new thing for me listening to him. It was the first time for me hearing about that. But what was instructive in it for me was the idea of the state-owned banks, and so that and keeping the monies within our economy, so that the investments was a lot of local persons could have invested, a lot of local persons were allowed and afforded the opportunity to take loans, etc. For me, that was instructive. The fact that he spoke to the banks being state-owned, because it was new for me hearing about this idea of from the aspects of the revolution in taking control of the banks, purchasing the banks, etc. from CIBC, and that was new information for me. But it was instructive for me in the sense, and I saw how that contributed significantly towards agricultural development, because it showed how funds could have now been easily accessed. And one of the issues we have now, a lot of the issues, especially with agriculture, is the idea of accessibility to funds. And funds generated specifically, the ease of accessing finances for agricultural development and agricultural purposes. And to me, this created that opportunity. And that's where I was able to, that was the perspective I took from it, because it was new for me in terms of them purchasing it and the cost of the purchase. And so I literally focused on the fact that the banks were state-owned, and that there was that drive towards the local investments and locals being able to have easier access to funds, etc., especially with the type of interest rates and so that was offered to allow them that sort of opportunity.
Yeah, another thing, the idea that the state cannot afford to do it is not going to work out. The idea of thinking that, well, you know what, it is the buying all the assets of the bank at the time, right, and not the
deposits.
Deposits, you're not buying the deposits. You're buying, so the whole idea that the thing when you buy a bank, you're buying all the money. The money in the bank is not theirs. They're just holding for these people. You understand? And the biggest thing you have to pay is the rent and the staff. So if we say, let's suppose the staff, government say, you know what, We go sponge this for 6 months or for 1 year. Government go pay this stuff in the bank, right? Which wasn't much people anyways, right? So you pay this, you include that part of a new venture, right? And let it make a profit, because the bank does make profit. You understand? And then you lower the interest rate. So it could be competitive at the same time. So more people put the money in the bank and get a better return on their money and the investment in the bank, and lend more money out at a lower interest rate, right? So we're coming to the bank for it. So at least the state enterprise, that banking system was set up to win from the one. I mean, if every bank leave, it left the state to own the banks to make a profit. The bank wouldn't lose, right? And then you have a situation where you spoke of earlier on about having I think there's, remember that today, the delinquent loans. They had only about 2% other person.
Yeah, yes, low percentage.
Yeah, of default. You know, where other banks have 16%, the CIBC and the bank is at 16%, you know, default. What if the NCB had less, little bit, 2% or less. So that to me, that was a great experiment. And I wish our governments could have continued doing that, owning the banks and let it run the way it was running effectively. I think that that would have been make a big difference. So let's go back to Bernard to here again. From where he left off.
So,
yes.
We refused to do any of that for the state sector. We didn't take away any of the privileges that private sector had in these regards.
Oops, I think I lost.
I think you went back too far.
Yeah. Where are we?
People are going to come to the loan because they're getting more money on their deposits, and they're being charged less for their loans to develop agriculture, to develop agro-industries, to develop manufacturing, to develop the guest house or what. So therefore, foreign banks are forced to fall in line. That's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Force them to fall in line. Competition did the job. Market mechanism, in other words, did the job. Right? So that is why we no longer needed to implement the original manifesto of 1973.
I wanted to ask you how I could get my hands on that manifesto. Actually, a question there. I could access the manifesto, the 1983 manifesto.
I have to check around, see who in Grenada would have a copy. You may have to photocopy their copy.
That's fine.
They may not want to part with it. Right, we must do that. The library the library not functioning anymore.
Oh, yeah.
What about Mary Shaw House? Mary Shaw House library.
I will check there.
They might have.
Yeah.
They might have. I'm not sure if Camp CC library would have. I'm not sure. Okay, if you don't get through, give me a reminder, and I will check somebody who has it. No, I know I have a copy myself. Finding it, I just moved house, so locating my stuff is going to take me a while. Because worst, I'll have to find mine, but there'll be people at home who would have it. All right, so that's an example now where you use having what you might call a beachhead in a particular sector and using it in a highly competitive way to pursue policies that are development oriented, force the foreign fellas, right? Or for that matter, the local fellas, you force them to fall in line and to also provide whatever service they're providing in a way that is development oriented. Give you another example, and again, we're talking agriculture. Marketing and National Importing Board. Now, we had an incredible number of reasons, objectives for the Marketing and National Importing Board. Multiple objectives. First of all, I always laugh when I hear dairy supporters. And I'm not talking about rank and file people, I'm talking about the one or two intellectual types who say, well, and I never forget in the election campaign back in 1984, the people in Calgary were saying how we took the international airport plans that was in Derek Knight's office. We broke into his office and took the plans, and all we did was implement them. One was, well, we had Gary set up the Provident Fund. You hear that every now, even now, some of these characters. He set up the Provident Fund. And so, NIS, I mean, we had NIS before them, so we called it Provident Fund. Forgetting, of course, that Provident Fund was for a handful of people, mostly agricultural workers and a few road workers. And the total amount they had, when they had money, was about $80,000, right? NIS has over $1 billion. And more importantly, apart from the fact that with only a tiny number of people, at the time of the revolution, it had gone bust. Like the National Bank of Gary, like everything we do with Gary, on bust. So that was a bit of a joke. The other thing is they say, but Gary set up a marketing board.
Yes.
The marketing board was supposed to be for buying fresh food from farmers to sell to consumers. Well, that went bust. That never really did anything of any significance. So we just ignored it completely. And we set up from scratch the national, the Marketing and National
Importing Board, yeah.
MNIB. Now, we had several objectives. One, we wanted consumers to be able to get basic necessities at an affordable and stable price. Now, merchants, many of them were charging all sorts of fantastic prices for rice, sugar, and so on. Some of these people were, in fact, dairy people, like Sheltus and Davis and so on. And Davis had a monopoly for sugar. Nobody else was permitted to bring in sugar except him. Nobody else. I have a chapter in my volume 2 of my memoirs dealing with that, right? And the corruption involved in that. And then there was 2 people, Sheltus and somebody else, who had the monopoly, the duopoly for bringing in rice. Nobody else could bring it in. And things like that. So there was a lot of corruption and even things that weren't controlled in that way because there were very few people importing it, like fertilizer for the farmers.
Yeah.
Right? The prices were too high. So again, we had a choice. And I'll tell you that straight because this is a policy matters. Everything starts with policy. You must have the right policy. Now, literally in the first phase of the revolution, I mean literally like the first 2 weeks, the then permanent secretary, because I say then permanent secretary because he was like about a few weeks from retirement age. Okay, so he was just fulfilling his duties, but informing me that he was about to retire. And the man who was in charge of price control chief of that department, Algernon and Twine, who died just about a year or 2 ago. We were at GBSS, we were in school together and so on. And his wife also passed very recently, Mrs. Antwine. Right?
Ursula Antwine.
Ursula Antwine, right. So it was her husband who was in fact in charge of price control inspectors.
Yeah, I actually spoke to her son.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Right. So Algernon came to see me with the permanent secretary at the time. And he said, look, we have a number of problems. First of all, sellers controlling rice and sugar say they refuse to stock the shelves, to sell it to the shopkeepers and so on, they're holding it because they're insisting that they want from the PRG the same deal they had with dairy. Now, what was the deal with dairy? Under the price control law, there were 40 items that were price controlled. Everything else you could buy, whatever price you want to sell it for, people either buy it or they don't buy it. Items that were vital for people on beef, sardine, saltfish, flour, rice, those items, cooking oil and so on. But there were 40 items like that, they were price controlled. That's from since colonial days. And the price control system was that when the item comes into the docks and it's landed, CIF, right? The wholesaler can add 7.5% margin to all his costs. So what knows the entire CIF that he gets it for, he can add 7.5% and sell it to retailers. If he's also a retailer, he can then add further 15% on top of that, right? So altogether, he gets 22.5% if he's both a wholesaler and retailer, which many of them were. If he's not, then he gets the 7.5% and he sells it at 7.5% more than his cost. So that's his profit there because he's covered all his costs. He then sells it to the retailers, the shopkeepers all over the country, who can add 15% as their gross profit. Gross profit, because they have to pay themselves a salary, any workers they have, electricity bill, and so on. So the idea was to keep the price within reason for poor people. These are poor people items. Right?
Yeah.
So that's why they were price controlled. But and Davis and Sheltos and these fellows had a special deal with dairy, whereby they were selling it for like 35 and 40% markup. In other words, they were busting
beyond,
way beyond what was permitted by law. They got away with it because I had a special deal. Back, you know, I don't have to spell it out for you. You know the ways of the world. But all the other industries that were not controlled in this way by Gary or any of his favored people, they too were taking advantage. So Algalal Pine comes to see me and he says, Minister, let me be frank with you. I have either 14 or 15, I forget what he told me. It's either 14 or 15 price control inspectors. And I'm in no position to accuse anybody of corruption because I don't have the proof that I could take into a court of law. But all I can tell you is that some of them are building multi-story concrete buildings of such dimensions that it would take 150 years of their current salary to build those buildings. So draw your own conclusions.
Yes.
Now, that is always the problem of using legislation and regulations under legislation to solve economic problems, rather than the market mechanism. You see, you know, people confuse this thing. If you're using market mechanism, that means you're really supporting capitalism, not socialism.
Yes.
Nonsense. The capitalists have fooled people into believing that the market mechanism belongs to them. It don't belong to them. It don't belong to them. Market mechanism existed years, hundreds of years before capitalism came into existence. Long before people who don't study economic history, you know, fall for this kind of foolishness. No. If you are serious socialist, meaning that you're really serious about making sure ordinary poor people get the benefit, rather than a handful of people at the top, then you must use the market mechanism. So that's what we did. It's very simple. If I bring in fertilizer with a markup that is enough that the marketing board can make a profit, it means that the private people bring it in can also make a profit, but not a super profit.
Yeah.
So that in the case of rice and sugar, we took those over 100%. We had no choice because the people who were running it were in a cabal with dairy, and they refused to sell to shopkeepers. We were in a situation literally in the first 2 weeks of the revolution. No rice on the shelf, no sugar on the shelf. You know, you realize the political implications for government.
Yeah,
you know, and people can't buy rice, they can't buy sugar because the fellas holding it and then refusing to sell it. So I give them notice. I say you have X number of days to put these items on the shelves. If you don't, you lose the right to bring them in. Because again, existing law from colonial days.
So they had a monopoly on these, the importation of these goods.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, in the case of Ben Davis, he had a special arrangement with Caroni Limited in Trinidad.
Yeah, I know Caroni.
So that when the government took it over, Caroni refused to sell it to the government, refused to sell it to MNIB. And they had a deal. The managers, or one of the managers, had a deal. So I said, well, fine, we'll buy from Colombia.
But look what happened to the Caroni Limited years later.
Yes,
they collapsed. Yes.
Right. So the fact of the matter is that you have this situation where items like that, we had to take over completely. Other items, we took over powdered milk. We didn't stop at us bringing in powdered milk, but we brought it in at a good price because we need it for mothers and for babies and for school children and so on. So we brought that in as well. And then, of course, we brought fertilizer. We only brought 10%. Here's the point. This is the equivalent of what we did with the banks. In other words, we use a system for cost of living control, for price control.
So stick up in again.
Mechanism and not laws.
Stick up in again. What I'm seeing in your discourse here, I'm actually being able to pull out the various points that drove the success of the agricultural sector. Absolutely. Because in that case, then you had a sort of control over the cost of input supplies.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So that towards the end, we have brought in tires as well, especially for the vehicles that farmers use.
Yeah.
That was close to the invasion, so we weren't able to really fully develop that. So we had a plan to bring in a lot more agricultural inputs, right? And by the way, that ties in with the deep water port in Grenville. Just remind me to raise that with you, because that is linked to that. But anyway, the important point here is that if you bring in 10% or at most 20% of an item, you let the private sector bring in the other 80 or 90%. But you sell it at a price that makes you a decent profit, but not a super profit. It means that the private importers also have to do that. They also will make a profit on every sale they make, but they will not make a super profit at the expense of farmers. And when they do that at the expense of farmers, and the farmers have to sell their products to the consumer will have to pay a higher price, because the farmer will have to charge more because it costs him more to buy the fertilizer, right? And it costs him more to buy the tires for his truck and so on. So it all feeds in the system. At each stage, it causes the cost to go up, and therefore the price, the ultimate price of the consumer to go up. Right. So the fact is, if you control 10 or 20% of the market, guess what? If you're selling a fertilizer, and I'm making up figures here, but just as an example, if you're selling a pound of fertilizer for $5, and another fellow selling it for $8, guess where the farmer's going to buy it? They will buy from you. The same fertilizer, identically the same fertilizer. You're selling it for $5, they want to sell it for $8. They buy from you. Therefore, in no time at all, people stop buying from them. They're not stupid, they know that. So they're going to sell it for $5 too.
For $5, yeah.
That way you control the
price. So you control the price.
Absolutely. So you use a market mechanism, you use competition. It's another way of saying the market mechanism. You use competition to force fellows who are taking advantage to no longer be able to take advantage.
So that was the ultimate aim then of the state enterprises.
Right. So in other words, we had several aims for state enterprise. One was to increase employment.
Yeah.
Right? One was to increase employment. One was price control in the way we have just been describing. A number of other things. One was to develop a whole new export sector and so on. So it depends on which enterprise, state enterprise we're talking about, what would have been the goals. Altogether, we have about 10 or 12 different goals, objectives for the state enterprises, depending on which one we're talking about. Okay?
Yeah.
So, so therefore, we did that. For the National Transport System, the NTS, right? What was happening is gas price will go up by 10 cents a gallon. And then fellas would charge 20 cents a gallon more. The traveling public. No, remember, gas at that time was about 50% of cost. So if it's gone up by 10%, they're supposed to put up by 5 cents. If it's gone up by 10 cents, they should put up by 5 cents. Not full 10 cents, but put it by 20. Put up even more. So now we say, look, we're going to run the buses, and we're going to run them at a price that people can make a living, but they're not going to take advantage of people. People have to use the buses to get to work, to get to and from work. Children have to use it to get to and from school. And their parents are workers and small farmers on meager incomes. So they can't afford this going on forever. Next thing, the buses, when you see what do you call it, time for work, which is also time to go to school. In most cases, rush hour.
Yeah.
And then stopping for children, then stopping for school children, because school children is half price. They want the bus full with.
I paid 50 cents.
Right. You have to, and that's alone they want. I know that for the children have to pay full price.
50 cents on bus goes to Grenville.
Right. So therefore, not stopping for school children. So school children are having difficulty getting to school on time. Next thing, When you see 5, 6 o'clock reach, all them bus gone.
Yeah.
You leave the market space and Jordan and they're heading for Guav, they're heading for Sotes, they're heading for Grenville. The place goes down by 6 o'clock, 6:37. They had no bus running back in those days. Forget about weekend. Bus run Saturday morning because they used to work. People used to work Saturday morning. But by early afternoon, there are no bus in the place. You can't get transport. And Sundays, no transport. People want to go to visit their relatives in hospital. You have to charter a bus. You want to go to the beach. You can't go because there's no buses running. So the national transport system was set up, usually run until 9, 10, 11 at night.
Yeah.
People could go to cinema, right? People could go to dance. People could, on weekends, they could go to the beach and so on. And because it had these large buses and there are 48 of them on the roads, under instruction, you don't stop no school child. You don't pass no school child.
Yeah.
School children, you have enough seats for school children as well as adults. So, and by controlling the price, it meant that the working class who have to get one from work and the children of the working class who have to get one from school could do so at a price that stays the same for years. You know, throughout the revolution, we started the bus service, I think, in the middle of 82. Throughout the revolution, from there onwards, the price never raised, you know.
Yeah.
Right? So, all right, so in every area, banking, importing of all different goods, public transport, all those things. In the case of electricity, what we did was we spun the thing on the head. We inherited a system whereby the people using the least electricity, the first 50 units, cost more than the next 50 units. And then the next 50 units. In other words, the more electricity you use, the price per unit went down. We turn it around. We turn it on its head. We say that is madness because the poorest people could afford 1 or 2 light. That's all they have in their house. Annual house they're living in. And therefore, they would be using 50 units. Therefore, the 50 units they're using, you sell it to them at cost price, no profit, cost price. So the first units, the 50 units that everybody use, cost price. The next 50 units are tiny.
You froze again.
No, you're frozen, come on, good. Okay, we'll have infection there. So Tessa, you see what is happening, right? The process of development and the transferring of power from the state, from the private sector to the state.
Private sector to the state. So I wanted to ask him about the idea, the concept of the mixed economy. Because he spoke about that, the mixed economy model.
Yeah.
Yes. But he froze.
Frozen for a while. So yeah, what you so far?
This is excellent. This is excellent information because I'm seeing how what he's showing there in his back. Yeah. I'm seeing at the different. It's not just about going direct to the sector, but showing me how each area, in terms of policies and the types of policies that they implemented, led to the success of the sector. So he spoke about the policies surrounding transportation, the policies surrounding the market, the policies surrounding state enterprises. So you're seeing how all of these actually led to the success of the sector. I think this is very important. Yes. This is excellent information.
Come on, Cole, you're back. Yeah, but where are you? You there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm. This is an excellent trip down memory lane for me, man. Excellent. As it relates to how NIS came into being, I remember the incident with Ben Davis and Sugar. I mean, I don't think Bernard is really saying how critical that was, but Ben Davis literally decided and had the revolution not moved immediately, okay, Ben Davis could have resulted in the collapse of the revolution. His actions, because if you can't provide the basic food group, what was part of the Grenadian diet, regular staple at that time: flour, sugar, rice, oil, some kind of thing. If there was a run on those things, if there were continued ongoing shortages, it could have led to the demise of the revolution very, very, very early. And it shows not just not because the whole question of marketing board, as he indicated earlier on, was part of the overall 1973 manifesto. I don't know if it was called Marketing and National Import Board then, or it was called something else. But that's the importance of that's when I talk about the plans, the vision, the plan, the objective, and the execution. And that's where the revolution was really a master, really.
They are really, I mean, Tessa, you want to come in here? You're muted.
A lot of things came in that last segment you mentioned there. The idea of trying to get rid of that, the monopolizing of certain items, especially items that are considered as or basic needs that often are utilized by the marginalized persons, and ensuring that these are not controlled in a monopolistic type of way. So he brought in back the concept of marketism, which we refer to as the free market in economics, to ensure that there is that fair play on the market to offer everyone an equal opportunity. So that he spoke to that concept. And then I like the idea of providing for what we refer to as the marginalized, but not providing it in such a way that it appeared as if it was like a handout, but more so as an opportunity in that they too contributed, but they contributed at the same, whereas at the same time they were given an opportunity to access in a manner that didn't put too much of a pressure on them, in the sense that you created, for example, in the transportation sector, the subsidy, the way in which they were allowed to, pay for transportation, but it was provided in a sort of way that it wasn't too costly for the persons who were considered as the marginalized or the vulnerable in that aspect. And then again, creating that opportunity where the cost of the goods that they utilize the most were it was affordable then. So you created that space where everyone had that sort of equal opportunity, and not one being, and that brings back the whole socialist perspective from the
The interesting thing, Dr. Barry, is that but I didn't go into it. I guess he's modest in his as he's gotten older. But the reality is that the Ben Davis thing with sugar, and I forgot, somebody had the exclusive on rice also. I forgot who was the person at the time. But I remember.
Mention of all those who had monopoly on.
Ben Davis was the biggest one, because sugar. We were a country addicted to sugar in those days, and sugar was more expensive than anything else. Ben Davis had a special relationship with Gary. That Gary was making a cut for having. Ben Davis was paying Gary a cut for having exclusive rights to be the sole importer of sugar into Grenada, and but I didn't mention that, but that was a big part of it. That's why they came and said that they wanted the same relationship that they had with Gary,
I think one thing again to point out is creating a competition, a competitiveness in the market. I'm forcing you to bring your price down, but you're not going to go to business, but going to make a profit still, but not a huge profit. So, but the 10%, they'll bring 10%. What is the strategy behind all of that? So you bring 80%, I bring 10 to 20%. all right? But I gonna bring my price cheaper than yours. So you force your 80% to bring down to my level because people come into my store to buy instead of coming to you to buy. You see? So you create a competition that everybody makes and makes the money to survive.
And John, I'm especially glad he made that point, that capitalists make you believe that they're the only one who believe in market forces. All right. But that the concept of market forces existed long before the birth of modern capitalism. What we actually experiencing now is not even capitalism; it's a sort of vulture capitalism, right?
Yes.
But that here you have exactly where you bring in 10 to 20% of the market, you sell for a profit, but not a profit that's going to be debilitating for the marginalized and the least fortunate among us. All right. And now they either bring their prices down or they decide, you know what, we can't do this anymore because we're not making, goblets of money that we were making before. So they result in giving up additional market share. And then you who are serving the public's interests, okay? Because Dr. Barry, I love how you put it. It ties back into everything because if all of a sudden, right, children fares are being subsidized every day to go to school. Sugar don't have no special additional Ben Davis and Gary tariff on it. So it went from, let's say, 50 cents a pound now down to 35 cents a pound. That is putting additional money back into the pockets of the people who could least afford it.
Yeah.
And these people don't have large bank accounts, right? They don't have anything that we call disposable income. Everything that comes in, they spend it. So even that little additional now that they're saving, they probably spending it on their children. They probably fixing a hole in the house. They, all the things that when you put it all together, help grow and expand your economy. And I'm particularly glad that he made mention of the fact that as real socialists, we also have to believe in the market and not necessarily leave everything up for the market to decide like the vulture capitalists believe, but that to allow reasonable and sensible market forces to come in and dictate what happens. And that's very instructive.
Yes, so that is what it is. I know just to have some time, some work to do. We're gonna have a couple of minutes. I want to go to the part where the last part where he spoke of the Deepwater Harbor in St. Andrews.
I want to hear about that.
Something that we need to explain to the people to hear and talk about. So let me just slip over to that.
How many hundred? Oh, we put them down. 200,000. I said, no, $1. So the left was just fulfilling his.
Where was I?
You went a little further back.
I said, no, they want. I know that was trying to pay full
pay
price.
50 cents of God goes to Granville.
Your certificates, you got the necessary O levels or A levels, as the case may be. You sell it to them at cost price, no profit. It's the 50 units that everybody use, cost price. The next 50 units are tiny.
Okay. Okay, I think that's where we are.
A lot for consumers. And I want him to speak about the agro processing and so.
Yes, I think when he came back, we're going to, because one of the things he said about people buying big buildings and stuff. I know one price control build a big building in Granville, a wall construction. And he's a price. So he wants a person that
that capitalize on that type of
that underhand thing. That's our scheme.
Those special relationships, man.
I think I think we can't even name the mall. It's close to Trenchong in Granville, you know. A big mall.
Small mall.
Yeah, he was a price.
He mentioned
remember him built
Mr. Antoine, it's funny that Mr. Antoine played that critical role in bringing that to light to him, because I don't remember Mr. Antoine being a supporter of the revolution. He was chairman of the board of our school, and they were hostile to the revolution. I remember them being very hostile.
He's back now.
Necessities.
Mark, yeah, we dealt with the question of state enterprises. We dealt with the market economy.
Farmers now, right? Let's get to farmers now.
Yeah.
We dealt with farmers indirectly through fertilizer and
through the input supply,
and tires and so on, right?
Yeah.
But farmers in a more direct way now, in that we had a system whereby we gave guaranteed prices and quantities for all the products that farmers produce. In other words, you got a price before you plant the seeds, before you put anything in the soil, for that matter, for the new crop. You have a written contract that says you can sell X quantity for Y minimum price.
Right.
If you get more than that, you will not get less than this price, guaranteed price. And that gives the farmer definite assurance. You can't have marketing, you can't have farmers sweating their lives out, producing things, and then when they come with it, you say, well, you can't buy all of this. This is too much. No market. So marketing is a critical element for farmers anywhere in the world. And now we had 3 markets for them. 3. We had the local market. We had the foreign market because we had started shipping things, England, other islands, and so on. I think we even shipped something to the United States and Canada, small amounts. And so we had the foreign market. We had the local
that was
market.
from MNIB.
MNIB.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And we had the agro industries market that we had started up. So farmers know from no market except what they could sell in the local, market themselves or on the roadside. We're talking about a national market system. For the first time now, they have a system where they can sell their stuff and they know that as much of they produce will be bought and will be bought at a guaranteed price. That's a tremendous burden you're taking off the backs of farmers.
Yeah.
And then marketing and National Import Board now have 3 markets now: the local, export, and the agro-processing markets. 3 markets, right? So MNIB is performing 3 functions in that regard, 2 vital ones for the farmers, namely guaranteed quantity, guaranteed price.
And that, to jump in there, that also contributed to the price on the local market for consumers.
Absolutely. So the consumers benefit, both in terms of the availability of produce and the price. Right? So they benefit as well. And the farmers benefit. Everybody benefits. And one of the things I got from John talked about the importance of rural economy, and we'll say a lot about that in the future. But let me just add this. When you substantially increase the incomes of farmers and of the workers that the farmers employ for the extra production that they now are doing by improving the rural economy. Right? So that, in other words, by pumping more income into the rural economy, by giving farmers guaranteed prices and guaranteed quantities that they are sure of the market, to increasing incomes in the rural areas, both for the farmers and for the people employed by the farmers, workers. That's one thing. Secondly, remember, just to move on to rural economy for a while, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Increasing employment in the rural areas, to reducing unemployment in the rural areas. You are also providing electricity, because remember, there were 1 or 2 communities that had no electricity. They expanded electricity in the countryside. And in the case of Karakou, half the island didn't have, half didn't. Electrify the whole of Karakou, and Petit Martinique had no electricity.
I saw that.
We built a new power station with 3 engines. You only needed 1 to function, and 1 for backup when you're servicing that up. But we had a 3rd standby. We bought them as a part of a package deal. So we built a brand new station with 3 brand new machines, engines, to supply electricity for the first time. So that electrification of the island is another benefit of the rural economy. Also, you have the fact that the fixing of the roads, farm roads, feeder roads, and so on. That's important for agriculture. That's important for the rural economy. House repair program. Guess what? Most of the homes that were being repaired altogether repaired 16% of all the homes. The poorest 16%, right, of all the homes in Grenada over the 4.5 years. That's in the rural area. Overwhelmingly, very few of the house repair was in urban areas, was in rural areas. So that's another thing. Milk feeding for pregnant mothers, for school children, and school feeding, mostly rural, right? Scholarships, first of all, free secondary education, right? We reduced it, took us 2 years. Each term, I think we dropped a certain amount because it had started at, I think, $50 a term, and it's 3 terms. $150 EC per child in school. And back then, that was real money, yeah?
That was it, yeah.
That was, you know?
Yeah.
So that, in other words, school feeding, books and uniforms, house repair, milk feeding, all of these, and free secondary education, free university education, because although we didn't have a university, we had scholarships offered at 40 countries, 40 had scholarships from people who went all the way Australia, France, right? People went Mexico, all over the world, you know. Even the United States, we even had people training in the United States, postgraduate through the OAS. OAS funded it. So we had 40 countries. Cuba, of course, everybody knows about because of the doctors and the dentists and so on. We had offered some. So we had enough scholarships at university level that we never had to turn away one single student who qualified. Once you had your certificates, you got the necessary O levels or A levels, as the case may be, you were sure of going to university.
Scholarship, yeah.
Right? Which, again, think of the number of doctors we have in Grenada trained in the revolution. How many of them come from urban areas? How many of them come from Grenville Town or St. George's Town? Most of them come from rural areas, right? So the rural economy benefited in all these different ways. Another thing was we got the agreement of the Soviet Union to build a deep-water port in Grenville. They were going to be doing the research, engineering designs, the research and design, because as you know, Grenville is below sea level.
Yes.
So, and there's a reef structure and so on. And you have to be careful about not messing around with the reef structure because you could cause all sorts of environmental catastrophe. So all of that had to be scientifically researched, and then build the deep-water harbor with a proper channel for getting in, avoid ecological damage. The reason why we wanted the deep-water harbor in Grenville was a number of reasons. One, we were taking away Paul's Airport and putting it down in Point Saline.
So, yeah.
That is a major part of the economy of St. Andrews that was going to be lost.
Yes.
And so we had to be conscious of that. We have to have something else to replace that, right? So that, in other words, replace it and more than replace it. Because the only part of the island that we tried, by the way, to put the international airport at Tulsa, we have had to build into the sea for several hours.
It was too.
We had to knock down the big mountains.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't practical. We got engineers to study it. It was not practical. So once we realized we had to put points in, there was nowhere else in the island that was flat enough. We then realized, no, we have to. So the one reason was we had to replace the economic damage that would be caused by removing one and only means by which people can travel to Grenada. Secondly,
oops. Okay, we have a glitch again.
Yeah.
That
Drop. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. Right. That all inputs into agriculture, all implements, machinery, equipment, fertilizer, seeds, anything anything to do with inputs into agriculture would come through Grenville Port, new expanded modern Grenville Port. And all agricultural exports would go there. Bananas, cocoa, nutmeg, maize.
So in other words, a development of the seaport.
Absolutely. So that, in other words, St. George's now going to be dry goods and tourist liners. Dry goods and tourist liners. And in the country, Grenville would be all agricultural inputs and all agricultural exports. So we are specializing our two major ports, right? And all the production that is taking place in St. John's and St. Mark's, the West Coast. Remember, there's a road that runs right through the center of the island from St. John's over to St. Andrews. There's a road.
That's in Budge Grove.
We were going to in Budge Grove.
We're
going to be repairing it. Right. We're going to be repairing it so that people can get the banana trucks and all the other trucks that bring in agriculture, and they'll be able to come across very easily and quickly Grenville Port, right from the West Coast straight across. So there will be no great problem. In fact, it will be no greater problem doing that and going all the way to St. George's from the West Coast and from the East Coast. So that was the plan, okay? And that too would have meant actually
you're breaking
jobs in the port in Grenville. You're talking jobs.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You're talking jobs. You're talking jobs on the port. You're talking jobs in transportation. You're talking all the different areas of bringing in produce at a cheaper rate because they're coming straight in. And also the transportation costs for you to take the bananas, your coconut nutmegs from the breadbasket of Grenada, St. Andrews. And the port is right there in St. Andrews. So that you don't have to travel all the way to St. George's to export bananas.
I was part of that generation that toted bananas to go to Geese.
Right. Exactly. So so these are all of the some of the benefits, right?
Yeah.
For the rural, right? Of course, rural economy and agriculture. You see how it's difficult to talk about one with the other. The other thing we had in mind, and we had actually raised the money. It's in World Bank documents and on, because we had worked it all out. It was going to be for the period July 1st, 1983 to June 30th, 1986. That 3-year period, we had raised $350 million dollars. Again, think of what that money was worth. Imagine $350 million, that's like $2 billion now, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking 40 years ago. So we raised $350 million. In other words, all of the budget items, all of the capital items that we had, and that was in the document to the World Bank and IMF, money already raised, money we already had. Everything was already sourced. Finance was already sourced. It wasn't something like we have some high in the sky idea and maybe we might get the money and maybe we won't. It wasn't that kind of thing. So we had in report, Soviets were going to be providing that. We're going to have a cement plant in Kariakou. Soviets were going to be providing that. Mexicans, Libyans, and I think it was the Algerians. I know about Mexico and Libya for sure. And I think Algeria for the third one, but I'm not absolutely certain. I have to check my documents for that. 3 countries anyhow. We're going to be providing us with all of the equipment for 3 much larger agro plants than the one we had in Togo. Much larger. And with those, we're going to be putting one in, guess where? St. Andrews. One on the West Coast, St. John's. And one was going to be in St. David's. I think the St. David's one, we were going to specialize in minor spices. Because St. David's has a lot of minor spices.
I saw that in your document, yeah.
Right. So in other words, imagine putting on 3 agro plants close to where the production is actually taking place. The fruits falling on the ground, the vegetables, the this, the that, and the other, and so on. And also now close to the new port that are being developed. So we could export our agro products right there from the port. But we also have all of these plans. All of that is transforming the rural economy. Because the other thing that we were very conscious of was balanced geographic development. Balanced geographic development. We are very conscious of that. And we were very conscious of the fact that the immediate model meant that south of St. George's was going to get most of the south of St. George's and to St. George's we'll be getting all of the immediate development because of the international airport, because of the Sandino plant to produce housing. Remember down in the Tulu area? Because of the asphalt plant that was providing all the tarmac or the runway for the new international airport, it had to be close by. So we're using a quarry and developed an asphalt plant there to do that. So in other words, the immediate development of the tourism sector and of other sectors linked to that, and of the international airport for all purposes, not just tourism, meant that the south of St. George's, not the old capital of St. George's, but the south of St. George's will be the new pole of development. But we wanted to plan to immediately start doing something about the countryside. Otherwise, everybody's going to leave the countryside and come to live in South St. George's. Not
right.
Come down there.
Diversification.
Right. You end up with slums. You would have a lack of development. It's interesting, for example, Dominica, which back in those days was the least developed economy of the 4 Windward Islands, had the highest percentage of their total population living in Roseau, the capital.
Yeah.
Castries also had a similar situation for St. Lucia, and even Kingstown in the case of St. Lucia. In other words, ironically, Grenada, which back in the day was the most developed economy, had the smallest urban populations. St. George's Town had 2,500 voters. In the capital, that was my constituency, 2,500 voters in the capital, right? In other words,
that's a reflection of the development of the rural economy.
Right. We had actually bigger polling divisions. I mean, not polling divisions, constituencies in terms of voters in St. David's and in St. John's than in St. George's, than St. George's Town. I don't mean the whole parish of St. George's, obviously. So the fact of the matter is that we would lose that. In no time at all, we'd go the way of so many countries around the world, Africa, Asia, Latin America, where everybody comes to live in the town, and you end up with a set of slums all around it, shanty towns, and awful to look at. Because we have that in several Caribbean territories, as well as throughout Latin America, as well as throughout Africa and Asia. Because all the development centered in the cities. We were very conscious of that, which is why cement plant, Carriacou, brand new Deepwater Harbor, Benville, 3 brand new large agro plants, 1 in St. David's, 1 in St. Andrews, 1 in St. John's, and so on. So that was the model of development. So that's both rural economy, but it's also an attempt, a deliberate attempt to create balanced geographic economy and not just have everything, because there's all sorts of prices that the country pays, ecological damage, demographic confusion, when everybody comes to live in the capitals and you depopulate the countryside. The bright youths have nothing to do in the countryside, so they come down, right? The best brains in the country and live in the country, but there's nothing to do there. Other thing is by fixing the road, because the plan was, now that we finish with the international airport, which we would have done by March 84, we'd be using this high quality asphalt mix on brand new quality roads around the country that would last long, the way roads on an airport would last. Now, the purpose of that is, right, it means that you could be living in St. Patrick's and you're in St. George's in no time at all. You could be living anywhere in St. Andrews and you're in St. George's and vice versa. In other words, you could live anywhere in the island and work anywhere else in the island. You no longer had to live close to where you were working because everywhere became close by having good roads, quality roads. So that's another dimension of our planning. Now, the other thing that we had also, and you would know about this from your research, was agricultural schools.
Yes.
We started
school.
Right, the farming schools. We had 3 and there was one there from before. Remember there was Mirabeau?
Yes, that's
Mirabeau
Farm
Experimental Station.
And this served the region, eh? I've met quite a few persons who actually went from outside of Grenada who went to school at Mirabeau Farm School.
I didn't know that. Wow. I didn't know that. That's very interesting. Very interesting. So, in other words, so we had one in Boulogne. Remember? We had
Boulogne, yes.
Boulogne, in the big house there, that big great house there.
Yeah.
And we had one in La Sagesse. We set up a agricultural school there. And we had one in St. Mark's. I can't remember where in St. Mark's, where we had it. We had one.
Bookage, I think it was.
Bookage?
That's the land there. I think somewhere there. It's somewhere around there. Because I remember.
Somewhere, right.
Somewhere in the region, I think Bookage.
That area, right. So, in other words, that's important too, because what we're doing now.
We lost you.
Sheriff, where is 31%
agriculture and agro-industries into the countryside. Last one, I think, was in Bocage, St. Mark's, somewhere in that area. I don't remember the exact location. I remember going there, but I don't remember its precise location. So we had these 3 that joined the one that we inherited and which we tried to upgrade.
So the one you inherited was the one from Mirabeau?
Mirabeau, yes.
Right.
Mirabeau was the one we inherited. And what we did was to expand it and develop it further. And we had further plans for it. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And then, so we added these other 3 now, right? Which again tells you the emphasis on agriculture. Why are you opening 3 additional agricultural schools right there in the areas where agriculture takes place? You're not having an emphasis in agriculture. If your intention is just to put development in and around the capital, if your model is the model of so many other countries in the world, and basically you're spending no time at tourism is the thing. Let's put on hotels, more and more restaurants, more and more souvenir shops. If that is your whole orientation, because remember we were bringing international input, so we had nothing against tourism, don't get me wrong. But tourism must be treated as broader.
Yes.
Treated as broader. And I'll give that. Just remind me that the question of resilience, economic resilience, and the question of being able to face and to surmount external economic shocks. Right? Tourism is no help in that. The first thing that goes every time there's an external shock is tourism. Whether it's 9/11, the terrorist attack in New York in 2001, planes stopped flying for months. Tourism mashup. Then you had the 2008 financial crisis in New York, which all the banks failed, insurance companies failed in America and also in Europe and Britain, right? Again, people stopped travel, right? Then you had COVID-19. People stopped travel. Planes stopped flying again. Do you have a major hurricane? Sometimes the major hurricane is in a neighboring island, not even your island.
Yes.
Planes stop flying. Hurricane. What do you call it? Volcanic eruptions in Lucia, St. Vincent, Montserrat in the past, and so on. Earthquake. In other words, not disaster. These are things external to the economy, whether within the region or whether externally. Ukraine war. Ukraine war. Right? In other words, there's constant external shocks, constant. Scientists have already told us that the next pandemic is certain to come and more after it. Why? Because they point out there's a demographic structural factor. The human population of the world is taking over more and more of the land that wild animals alone had to themselves. So that humanity is coming into closer and closer contact to the areas previously reserved for wild animals. What that means is that the chance of the transfer of viruses from these wild animals to humans becomes easier and more possible, right? So they're saying because of this structural, demographic, and geographic factor, pandemics based on new viruses become much more likely. And the scientists have been saying this for years now. Let me tell you something. Before Trump took over as president of the United States under Obama, a special team of scientists which he appointed had produced a report with a detailed roadmap on what to do in the event of a pandemic like COVID-19.
Yeah.
They did it because of the Ebola crisis in Africa, which could have reached the whole world. But action was taken very quickly and it was stopped before it reached anywhere outside of Africa. So the fact is, that is what I think prompted the Obama administration. Well, Trump and them took over, they threw the garbage, right? They threw the whole plan of action. But the point I want to make is this, that if had COVID-19, don't think, well, oh, all right, well.
We miss you there.
Yeah. And probably another one, because the fundamental, are we okay?
We just missed what you were saying because they get cut off.
Oh, yes. I'm saying that COVID-19 is one pandemic. Other pandemics are short to come. The scientists who specialize in this have warned us of that. They're coming. And there's climate change. Climate change is causing tremendous problems.
So that's why the question on sustainability.
Right. And you have financial crashes. We had one in 2008. There's others going to come. Inevitable. And you have wars. War might be taking place all the way in Europe, Eastern Europe. And we're going to feel it in food prices. We're going to feel it in different aspects of the economy. All over the world is going to feel it, right? Prices are going up. Inflation is happening in a big way, right? So much of our food is imported and the prices are going up. Shipping costs and so on. Terrorist activity, like the Twin Towers in New York in 2001. In other words, what I'm saying is there's a great variety of different external economic shocks. And therefore, Caribbean countries, including Grenada, have to recognize that unless they reshape their economies and build a new economy that is centered around agriculture and agro-processing, they are playing with fire. And don't know it. Like a little child playing with a matchbox with live matches and don't know it. Because all they're doing is building more hotels, more tourism, and spending more resources in tourism. Last budgeting, Grenada, and I don't want to say this in a political way, I really don't. But last budgeting, Grenada, last year's budget, I think it's the last budget. If it's not the last budget, the one before the last. I think in a budget of almost $1 trillion, 967 million.
The last one, agriculture came way down on the scale again.
$18 million. Out of $967 million, 18 million directly for agriculture. Minister of Agriculture, when he was criticized for that, says, okay, but if you add the roads and feed the roads and other things that are linked to agriculture, it comes to about 50-something million. 50-something million out of almost 1 trillion for agriculture.
And that 50-something million does not go directly towards the agriculture sector. There are not a number of other supporting sectors to the agriculture sector that money is divided amongst. So it's still a problem.
Let's be kind. Yeah. Let's treat it all as if it's only for agriculture. 57 million, 57 million, 967 million. Come on. Are we serious? Are we serious? No, this is not by the way, this is not specific to the Grenada government. Let's be fair.
Yeah, it's the region.
All the islands doing the same thing.
Yeah.
All the islands doing the same thing.
Except St. Vincent to a certain extent.
Right. And I understand that. That's true. So the point is that we are in a situation where we are sleepwalking into disaster. We've had a number of cases of disaster, and we're not taking it serious. We've had the collapse of tourism in 2001. We had the collapse of tourism in 2008. We had the collapse of tourism in 2020 and 2021. We have all sorts of climate change coming at us. And despite all of that,
we're still not listening.
Still playing the fool. We're still focusing on the one industry that makes us a quick buck until disaster hits and it collapses. And
all right, so that is where we kind of ring the bell one more time. Backing up here. Delbert and Miss Dr. Barry had a share this morning. I'll give you a first go at what the conclusion of that matter was as it relates to the port, the Grenville port, and shifting all the load to St. George. As I always said before here, if St. George was, if Grenville was a ship, it would have been sung by now. All of those.
Yeah. Well,
but I'm talking about having a balance, a distribution of employment and manufacturing and everything, and put everything in the right way. So I want to hear your views on the comments. Dr. Barry was on it this morning. I want to hear your take, and from all what Bernard said, from the roads, and you take it piece by piece, the Deepwater Harbor in St. George, in St. Andrews, or manufacturing plants, agro-processing plants in St. David and St. Andrews, the steaming plant in Carriacou. This is amazing. But steaming plant, so distribute employment, so to speak, having employment in every place. You want to leave, everybody to go to St. George's, and we know that having everything on the south of the island doesn't make economic sense. And it make a mention about the slums having slum and notice all the other Caribbean countries where everything is shifted to the south and where the capital is, there's more shanty towns in those areas. And Grenada have preview to understand, and they think, well, we don't want to happen in Grenada. We want to create a balance throughout the island. I want to hear your take on that last segment.
So this again, because I had a lot of papers, both party papers and government papers, which were taken from me and never returned. But I don't know how Bernard was able to hold on to so much of his papers. But the reality is that since he wrote so many of these things, and since he was the point person for the revolution and the economy, I suspect that a lot of times he's speaking from memory, because if you live the experience, it's very difficult to I had cleanly forgot about the Deepwater port for St. Andrews, all right, for Grenville. And I wish Hudson was on here tonight, because Hudson for years have made the point that one of the reasons that contributed to the decay in the rural parishes and in St. Andrews in particular was the moving of the airport from Paul's to thing. The reality is, at the time, Paul's could not, maybe technology now, you could build an international airport. But at the time, the science, the technology was not available to build an airport there. And even if it was going to cost us twice or three times the amount it costs to do in Point Celine. I have always argued that, in those days, Paul's got about 4 or 5 flights a day, It was only Liat and the occasional plane that came in. I think Liat came in once in the morning, once right after lunchtime, and then once in the evening about 5:30, 6 o'clock. All right. So yes, it contributed to the St. Andrews economy. Just imagine how much more a deep water port would have contributed to that economy. It would have dwarfed the economic activity of Paul's Airport. And when you add that the cement plant for Carriacou, listen. I am both. I am heartened by knowing, having been part of some of this conversation, that when it comes to these issues of building a fair economy, building an economy where everybody becomes part of that, the engine of the economy, and everybody begins to see the tangible benefits of what they're doing, was really one of the great realization of the revolution. And Bernard referenced earlier on the question of the 40 countries during the 4 years that gave scholarships to the Grenadian people, and I was part of that. So in the Ministry of Education, we had a scholarship desk where we worked on these issues, and it was. I am glad he noted that the only criteria for getting a scholarship was that you were qualified to go in. We didn't try to figure out if your parents supported Gary or your parents supported the revolution or your parents were GNP or any of that. The only requirement is that you were academically qualified for the field of study that you selected. And I remember when we, going around begging for scholarship, we had a plan what areas we should be begging for that specifically going to aid in the, we didn't use the word sustainable, but will aid in the development of the country. And I'm gonna have to throw that little piece about the Deepwater Port by Hudson the next time we chat, because I think he would understand how more important, how so much more beneficial a Deepwater Port in Grenville, and it would not have been an easy task, because what Bernard mentioned with Grenville being below sea level, but there are deep water ports in under sea level locations in Denmark and in Norway and lots of other places. So I'm confident that we would have been able to pull it off. I'm just sitting here thinking about this, and I'm thinking, and I know, John, we have spoke about that, and Dr. Barry, you definitely have to be part of that conversation. In this critical, in Africa, they say when an old person, a griot dies, a library is burnt to the ground. But that is a griot, he has so much information, so much of the plans and programs of the revolution, and I think that those of us who are in a position now to do something should organize a series of lectures in Grenada, non-political, focus on policy, because Bernard really at heart is a policy wonk, and the genius in him is that he was also good at execution, which you don't really find. You either find somebody who is steeped in the science, knows the policy, can write the policy, but are terrible at execution. For some reason, he was blessed with those two gifts, right? To be great at understanding, formulating policies, explaining it to people, letting you know how it can change your life. And I was not able to call him, but I remember his address to us it could have been May of 1981, prior to Youth Camp 81, when we addressed the National Youth Leadership in GBSS. And I remember sitting there and he was telling us, well, if you recruit X, Y, and Z to come to this camp, and we break it up this way, and this focus on agriculture, this focus on construction, this is how much it's going to contribute to the economy after week 1, after week 2, after week 3. And I'm thinking there, I'm saying, well, how the hell does he know that, And I was sitting next to Bogo at the time. And, sometimes, you're young, you're brash. I kind of said it out loud, all right? And I remember Bogo kind of covering my mouth. And after the presentation, in typical Bogo form, I say, comrade, I don't know how I want to know. I want to better understand that, because when I go out to explain and recruit for youth camp, I want to know what I'm talking about. Typical Bogo form. He said, B-Man is signing the check, you just do what he says. Okay, so that was that was my experience with it. But the reality is that when we examine youth camp after, it produced exactly what B-Man said he was going to produce. And also, them men ran an experiment. We didn't know it at the time. And Dr. Barry, that was fascinating, right? They ran an experiment during youth camp to figure out, to confirm, I guess, the role that education can play in the development of a country. And the more educated your people are, it didn't matter what field of vocation they went into. The more educated your workforce is, the more productive they will be. So the experiment was, they created a camp in Bel Air Government School, which was called Camp Richardson. You remember that, all right? Camp Richardson was made up of all Form 4, 5, and 6 students. You had to be in one of those grades to be in Camp Richardson, all right? There were a few, other people who did, not more than about 5 or 6. But 99% of the camp was all high school students doing GC, preparing for GC or in 6th form college. And the result was in every single competition that were held among the camps, Camp Richardson won every living thing. Because first and you know who headed that camp? That camp was headed by Tally Francis, myself, Shane Ross, who was the other person, boy? I forgot. But it was basically the executive of the National Student Council. But and I remember after we found out that it was actually an experiment conforming to the revolution, why they needed to make even further investment in education.
Yeah.
In education. So listen, this is a beautiful walk down memory lane for me. But I was saying earlier on, we have to figure out a way to do a lecture series in Grenada, especially in this period,
right,
with B-Man and other people like Dr. Barry and other people who can have this kind of conversation throughout the island at some point in time, maybe later on this year, maybe early next year, where people can begin to understand policies, understand a way forward for our country, understand what was possible during the revolution, some of the accomplishments that were made that people forgot, that have never been spoken about, but not so much to boast, but to say that some of the things that were attempted then can also be repeated now, and you would see the even greater level of success, because now technology has made it so much easier for us to do.
All right.
That yeah.
Okay. So let's go to Dr. Barry to close off the night here, to give her views on the last segment of Bernard Code's presentation here tonight. She had a fair share of it today. I think she sat down. Fair share of and took in a lot of what Bernard said. I mean, there's lots of stuff Bernard said. So I will send you Delbert. I'm going to send you the actual recording of today's, because you could listen to it in your leisure time. I'll send to you in your leisure time. And Dr. Barry have soaked in so much today. I know she had more. We spent 4 hours today. 4 hours.
About 3.5 thereabouts.
Today, right? To deal with the whole idea.
And he indicated that he just scratched the surface.
Oh yeah.
All day with Bernard.
So I advocated for another opportunity to get more information.
So yeah, so you now have, I mean, what you got today, and a piece of the pie tonight, but you have got a bigger slice this afternoon with Bernard. There are a lot of people who asking me, can I get to speak about, can I get to speak about Bernard? But the reason why I try to regulate Bernard time in a lot of cases, because how his sleep time, his sleep patterns, and his lecturing. So he's not younger as he used to be, but he needs the rest. He needs lots of rest to be able to perform at full potential So when you ask me, John, can I get it, get to think about it now? Yeah, good. But I got to make sure that he schedules sleep time is rest. He get his rest to be the peak performance. Yeah. So Dr. Barry, today I really pulled Bernard in, and he's still not 100% where he want to be yet. Because he had some stuff dealing with. He's not fully at his full best right now. But he was able to pull. He was really taken in by your presentation on Gemfm 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, almost a month now. He was really impressed with your presentation. I got to speak to that sister. I got to get that. So we scheduled that meeting today with him, and it really paid off for me and bring me back to a lot of stuff. I mean, at the end we talk about a lot of stuff that he did, and we laugh about it in the end. But tonight I wanted us to talk to the viewers about your take on the last portion of what he presented. Go ahead.
Well, as again, sometimes each portion contains so many things, but I just want to touch on two really key aspects. One is that of decentralization, and the other of that of the human resource development. So decentralization in the sense that, it created opportunities outside of town, in that the idea of developing the rural economy and looking at development of the rural economy. So he spoke, as Mr. Baptiste mentioned there, the idea of the Deepwater Harbor project. And he mentioned the moving of the Pulse Airport and the reason why, and he spoke about the technology behind it with and what they took into consideration there was that they were moving by moving the Pulse Airport and by making the international airport in St. George's, they took into consideration they were moving a lot of economic activities from the rural, from St. Andrews, which is a rural community, rural sector. And that was instructive in how they approached it. And so they looked at other opportunities to generate revenue or to create employment, etc., within the rural economy. So the idea or within the context of decentralization. And when I looked at that, I saw a backward step for where we are now in the state of our rural economy, as opposed to the views that were emanated there and what was the attempt to implement to ensure the development of rural economies through agro-processing, through the creation of employment, to ensure that economic activity was just as active in the rural communities as it was in the urban areas. And that for me is something very instructive, and that we should take a serious page off, because if you look at the state currently of our rural areas, it's very much underdeveloped, and we need more in terms of diversification and decentralization of the economic activities. Secondly, the other key point that he raised in that particular segment spoke to the context of human resource development and how many scholarships, and Mr. Baptiste spoke about the importance of education. And we're seeing it, in our state where, a lot of people, we need to create that space where persons are educated, not just at primary level, but way beyond the primary level. The idea of adult literacy for those, and then the idea of creating that equal opportunity for further education, for university level education. So you have a country where the human resource is so developed that it could contribute to driving development of the entire country. And for me, this was also very instructive, and it just brought me back to the whole idea of where we were all, the importance of universal education and moving everyone to a certain level. And this only doesn't only contribute, it contributes to also the development of the rural sector, because when you educate persons in the rural economy and the wide areas of scholarship opportunities, not just in sciences, but in in other skilled areas. You had a number of persons being educated in other skilled areas, not just in the science, but also within the agricultural sector, etc.
Yeah.
So this for me, the development of the human resource, as well as the context of the idea of decentralization of the economy, decentralization of economic activities, is the two key and most instructive points I took away from that last segment there.
Right.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, and like you said, there were so many different disciplines. My brother studied to be a vet in the Soviet Union and now lives in London and is doing his thing, so.
Can you imagine if all the people that were sent out to the 40 countries would have come in a revolution, fully educated to run an economy, to run a state, were educated enough to be able to produce and to apply the skills and talent from whence they came back to Grenada. The doctors, the hospital have been built, have been more sophisticated, and all this stuff will be happening. But I want to say something that Brian said earlier, and probably you guys probably heard it but didn't pay attention to it. We wasn't able to produce enough fruits for the local market. So he was in other Caribbean countries to produce like Grenada. So which means that it was not only a Grenada economy that will be growing. The region will have benefited from a progressive government. That was
he mentioned that actually we would have seen then the action of CSME, not just in words.
Yeah. I got a joke for you, right? I remember before the agro processing plant in True Blue went live, we had collected mangoes, and I'd never seen so much mangoes in my life, right? Tons and tons and tons of mango, and refrigerated them. And because the machine, its capacity was so large that you couldn't put it into operation without them. So we're good now. We're collecting mangoes for a good 6 weeks, and there's mango palooza in True Blue. And they turn on the machine and put the mango. And the machine worked for an hour and you process all the mangoes. and then everybody said, well, what are we going to do? But now you have micro machines that would be able to fit into a situation like Grenada. And it was I remember on the research that we had done, I think it was for the 1981 budget, I think we had determined that at that time, 8 to 12 million pounds of mango was going to waste in Grenada. The number now is much higher.
Yes.
And see that, and that's the thing. A lot of times we did not really get the concept at the time. Yeah. So what we have had happening was the fact that Grenadians, in a sense, didn't really see the bigger picture yet, but it was unfolding before us, right? And to get people in the Caribbean involved in the process, economic process of Grenada was huge. Yeah. Imagine Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Barbados were being involved in supplying Grenada with raw materials for the factories that have been set up. The one in Guelph, the one in St. Andrews, and the St. David's plant, plus one in True Blue. So
I remember the farm schools, because we in the Ministry of Education was involved in setting up like a program of physical education for those schools in Boulogne. I remember particularly Boulogne, because whenever we went to Boulogne, the Boulogne school seemed to always had it going. They always had food. They always had the most fruits and vegetables, and you could go. Yeah, I remember and you could go to Boulogne to do a presentation. With
You
them,
know, that was something that was new to me in the conversation with him, because I never knew that we had other agriculture schools. I only knew of Mirabel Farm School, and that's something that I think many Grenadians aren't aware of.
Boulogne was a nice, was a beautiful. I mean, you go there. I'm leaving with my carload full of fruits and vegetables to go back down to St. George's, because we had worked. We brought up those coaches from the Ministry of Sports to work with them. The Bull Williams and the Raphael Cronies and all that, because we had a holistic approach to education, right? They on the farm. It's not just about farming. They have to do exercises. Some of them were sports fans.
Yeah.
So, and we did that with the nursing school during that time too. So listen, this was a really nice trip down memory lane for me. Some stuff I had forgot. I had cleanly forgot.
It was a new trip for me, not just
the deep water port, the cement plant in Carriacou. I always remembered that, but I had forgot about the deep water port in St. Andrews, because at the time my focus was on the national stadium. Yeah.
So, guys, it has been a pleasure, real pleasure having Ms. Dr. Berry back with us again. And
absolutely.
And we're looking forward to have another discussion in the future with Dr. Valma and Dr. Fletcher and others, to have a symposium type discussion.
With
all those agriculture and farmers.
And we got to take this show on the road, man. We got to take. We got it, because Dr. Barry, our people are dying for this kind of conversation. I spent almost 3 years in Grenada following the Trump becoming president. I was like, I can't live in this country under this man. I have to go. So I went to Grenada. Yes, I could not. I'm sorry. I could not. I was so frustrated. I remember turning off my TV. I couldn't look at the TV for like 90 days, and then I said, you know what? I feel like I'm going crazy. Let me just get out of town. So I just left and went to Grenada for vacation. And then I realized, you know what? Nah, I'm going to stay down here for a while, And after I got there, I started having this sort of dinner discussion. Dr. Fletcher came to a couple of them. That's my old buddy. And we would have them at different places. I remember we had 2 in Batway. We had one in a place in St. Andrews. We had different places. And it was strictly food and good conversation.
Yeah.
And we invited a lot of young people, because you can't say you want to transform anything if you're not involved in young people in what you do. And I remember after one of I think it was the second one in Batway, this young lady came up to me. She probably was 19, 20 years old. And she said, oh my God, she said, that's how you guys live in the United States? I said, no, that's how people live around the world. It's not just us in the United States. She said, she had graduated TAM-CC, had an associate degree in something. She said, I felt I learned more here tonight than I learned that I got from my 2 years at TAM-CC. She said, please, when you have another one, invite me. It doesn't matter where you having it, I'm coming. And we held a series of them, and with young people. A lot of us ourselves, some of us who were involved in the revolution, but we always invited young people to come in and listen and join in the conversation. And so there's an appetite for that. There's an appetite for that. And I would like to see something.
I hope that going forward, I could be able to convince Bernard that we do a whole evening of this Revo economics. You have the documentation, you have this stuff. Just have to get him up in a time when he could be more relaxed and in a better healthy situation. His eyes back to where he should be and stuff like that, so we could have him do a full presentation on Revo economics 101.
Yeah.
I
according to sectors.
Yes.
Yes.
And he could do it. You have the documentations, you have everything laid out already. So I think I sent you there, but I think you should study it more. And
I will.
Yeah. So a lot of people have it. I sent it to a couple of people to study it for us for tonight, for us to discuss it. But nevertheless, we had a good night. And I think those people who stayed on, I think there's only one sort of I don't know if it's a negative, just an opinion from one person here. The other person was just taking it all in. One guy, I think it was Simon Samuel, which was, this guy should be ashamed of himself.
Based on what? Based on what? Exactly. Ashamed of himself based on what?
So I if anybody listening to this tape tonight and not convinced that the architect of the Great Revolution was Bernard Code, who really put everything in structure, the economics in place for Grenada, and we still need to have that done, and because this is what works and did work and could work still if it is reintroduced into the Grenada economy today. So again, guys, thank you guys so much for being here. Dr. Berry, thank you for taking time off.
Thanks so much, and take care.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Okay,
thank
good
you
night.
Very much.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
All right. Yeah, but that was a really good night, and I was sending or email you the full recording.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to go out on the road this evening. I mean, after our show this morning, I went into New York City, so I was a little
You want to hear the latter part. The latter part of it is really juicy. We had a good laugh in the end there, but a lot of stuff that was said in the end was really of great concern, especially with women involved in non-traditional area of work and stuff like that. One of the women that was sent to abroad to start to operate heavy equipments, training, in electrical and all areas of the economy, women will get involved in that, and who was responsible and so on, getting all this stuff done. So that was a really that tape, that recording today was really good, and I hope that the people who want the copy of it, we have to edit out some stuff that we just chat in between, but that was a really good presentation to by Bernard. It was a really good discussion between he and Dr. Barrett. So again, we got a little bit of synopsis of what it is tonight from Bernard. We didn't go through the whole tape because it's about 3.5 hours long. So,
yeah,
that tape, and really good stuff. So it's a page of Rebel Economics 101 that any government need to use to develop the country. Because interestingly, he made the point about the sustainability in a sense. Tourism alone can't do it for us. Yeah? Alone can't do it for us. We need to go back, not go back, but go forward and develop our agro industry better. Get more people involved in a more scientific approach towards it. No. To better be able to sustain ourselves going forward. Because you always have to prepare for what will come. There's something gonna come, there's always gonna be a disaster somewhere that will affect our way of life, economically or socially. And that we have experienced recently with COVID, so we have to go back to basics and have it done. So again, man, tremendous day, and again, a tremendous night. I promised my wife to cook today. I didn't cook. Yeah, I didn't cook today, so I have to make up for that somehow. But nevertheless, we had a good day, and she actually aided me. We doing all that stuff. She went out and make grocery, take the car, go to make the grocery and stuff like that. And so she left me to do what I'm doing here, and I thank her for that again. Honey, I appreciate your help. And she's always behind. People don't see her much, but she in the engine room, making sure that everything well. Both she and Genesis, they are in the engine room. Genesis is working on some stuff for Gemfm, so we'll see a lot more happening out at Gemfm here in the future. So Genesis is finishing up doing up media study and some broadcasting stuff and other advertising and marketing of Gemfm. All of that she's studying. So we will see a lot more. We take more time to build this, but all I want is asking persons to donate to us. We need to buy some new equipment again, so make a donation to us, $100, $20, whatever you guys can. We really appreciate them. So please help us here. Be a monthly partner with $1. If 500 people can give $1 every month, that will help us tremendously to keep the system here, and cover all the little things that need to keep your decision going. All right, so be a monthly partner of $1 and join Gemfm. We have the Gemfm page, so be a member of that page as well, and just go to the website and donate. All right, don't be afraid. Make a donation. $1, $2, $3, whatever it is. It goes a long way. All right. So again, Delbert, thank you so much, man. It has been as well a privilege having you here with us tonight. Again, thank you so much, my friend.
Great, my brother. Thank you. Have a good evening. Yeah.
All right. Good, guys.
Check out every trend Begonian. All of them have the solution. How to run this twin island and get the people out of this jam. You take a chance and give them the work, not realizing they was making joke. After punch you start knowing it's only old talk you was getting, because Jim no, Jack no, Harry know how to run the show. Paul no, Mac no, till the country falling down low. Low, the country falling down low. The country breaking down. You will see how the whole place tumbling down, and there's so much pride people in town. Low, the country falling down. Low, the country breaking down. You will see how that storm just tumbling down, and so much pride people in town. They got scholarship and they went away to come back down and help me, they say. So as they reach, they make we know they qualify to run the show. We tell me that they have plenty sense, in them we put the confidence. After much we get to realize was only word in front of the eyes. Jim no, Matty no, Paul know how to run the show. Rhino, George knows till the country falling down low. Low, the country falling down. Low, the country breaking down. You will see how the country falling down, and so much black people they down. Low, the country falling down. Low, the country breaking down. You will see how the whole place tumbling down, and so much black people they down. Some don't care if they win or lose. Everybody want to be boss. No one wants to take order. Everybody want to be leader. All man wants a position to satisfy their own ambition. Not knowing in this world today, everybody has a part to play. Flo no, Mary no, Harry know how to run the show. Back no, Kerry knows till the country falling down low. Low, the country falling down. Low, the whole place breaking down. You will see how the country falling down, and so much black people in town. Low, the country breaking down. Low, all the phones are stumbling down. You will see how the place is tumbling down, and it's so much black people in town. Low. If one really want to get through, one must know what one can do. Do what you have to do, I say. And leave the rest for someone to pay. Don't go off on no ego trip. That would only rock the ship. And if you listen to what I say, tomorrow will be a better day. Love no, rock show, and we know how to run the show. Make no, leave no, till the country falling down low. Lord, the country falling down low. The road is breaking down. Let's see how the country falling down. And so much by people in town. Lord, the country falling down low. The road is breaking down. Let's see how the friends is tumbling down. And there's so much by people in town. Wait there. You can see how the country falling down, and there's so much bright people in town. With them falling down, you can see how the country falling down. Just the whole damn place just falling down, and there's so much PhD in town. With them, you can see how the country falling down, and there's so much PhD in town. With them. As you see how the whole place tumbling down, and there's so much bright people in town. Lord, the country falling down, Lord, the country breaking down, the country tumbling down, and there's so much bright people in town. The country falling down, all the phones just tumbling down, the west, how my soul just slipping down, and there's so much bright people in town.
Yes, so much bright people in town, yet the country falling down. Wow, Black Stallion, Dr. Leroy Callis. Well, folks, this is Gemfm, and I'm your host, the Sheriff, yours truly, John Carter. I tell you, we educate and to liberate. And, those of you who requires, to be informed, still tuned to Gemfm all the time. Whether the 2:30 show, Texman Warren and friends, the 7:30 spiritual with text in the morning. You have the community dateline with Pastor Daphne. You have yours truly here every Friday night and Saturday night with the talking point. We have that. And don't forget tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, 7:30, Spanish class continues. So those of you who want to learn some Spanish, come join us tomorrow evening at 7:15, somewhere, yeah? Can't remember the exact time, 7:15. All right, join us tomorrow afternoon for that. Tomorrow, 5 o'clock, is the Open Bible Church, Standard Churches of Trinidad and Tobago. Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, Sister Michelle, Pastor Michelle, Seven Christ International Ministries service right here. And at 11 o'clock, the New Life Worship Center service on Gemfm. And who else we got? We have talking with Heart to Heart on Wednesday night. We text again, dealing with women and men hurting and different issues in their life. Tuesday night, we have an open forum for everybody to come in. It will be a Zoom, and everybody will be there. I'll post on my page. It's developing intimacy in marriage, and you're invited to come and be part of the discussion. Everybody, listen to Gemfm, be part of the conversation on Tuesday night, 8 p.m. right here. We're starting right here. So we'll send out the link. The post will be out, post on my website, on my webpage, and my Facebook page, the Gemfm page, and everything. Go see there. John Kelly's page, Gemfm page, the Gemfm.ca, and the Genesis Magazine page. It will be all over. So check it out. And come on out Tuesday night. Let's talk. Doris will be there. Veronica will be there. Yours truly, John Callis will be there. Texman will be there. The Minister, Reverend Joan Walker will be there. We'll be having a real good conversation. A lot of them, sex, money, everything in marriage, talking right here on Gemfm. Please join us. All right. And also, we'll be more happy. Go to the website, www.gemfm.ca, after the Facebook, and let's listen to some nice gospel music leading you into the morning. All right. So have a blessed night, everybody. Stay tuned and love it up. All right. Here we go. Right back here with Bunny Wheeler, Wanted Children. I'm out of here, folks. Blessed night. Doris, thank you very much. John Fleming, Steve Noel, Eulin Alexander, Desmond Kelly, Stephen Joseph, Mike Henry, Valerie Ross, Simon Samuel, Veronica Irvin, Lynette Charles. Good night to folks and those I mean, you know, listening on the radio. Good night to you. God bless you.